Welcome back, my family. Before we dive into tonight's creepy little journey, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who loves a good scare before bed. I would love to know where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. So drop it down in the comments and hype me up a little on YouTube. Now get comfortable, dim the lights, and let us step into tonight's story. I almost didn't publish this. That sounds dramatic, I know. People say it all the time in horror intros, like it's part of the script. But I'm not saying it because it sounds good. I'm saying it because I sat at my desk with my cursor hovering over delete for a full minute, and my hand was actually shaking. Not from fear in the fun, spooky season way. More like the kind of unease you get when you've already decided something is a bad idea, but you can't explain why. It was October when the first email came in. The subject line was plain. No emojis, no clickbait. Just, I don't go near alleyways anymore. I run one of those channels people put on while they're folding laundry or driving home late. You know the type. True style horror, first-person accounts, the "this happened to me" stories that feel believable enough to make you check your locks once the video ends. I get a lot of submissions. Most are decent. Some are obvious fiction. A few are genuinely unsettling in that way, that doesn't rely on gore or jump scares, just details that land a little too clean. This one landed too clean. The sender wrote like an adult trying to explain a childhood memory that never stopped being sharp. There were dates. Early October, a Friday night, a visit to their mom's apartment after their parents' divorce. There were names changed for privacy. There was an alleyway described so specifically I could picture it without trying. Narrow, dark, damp concrete. Orange streetlights that made everything look rusted. And the line that stuck with me was simple. They didn't chase us. They just watched. I read it twice, then a third time slower. That's when I noticed the attachments. Not photos of clowns. Not proof. Nothing that would convince the internet. Just artifacts. A screenshot of a phone note titled "Allie, don't forget," with a handful of bullet points. A voice memo, 10 seconds long, recorded in a car. Mostly silence, then a faint tap, 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 and the sound of someone swallowing hard. I should have stopped there. I should have chalked it up to someone who knows how horror works. But then 2 nights later, another email came in. Different sender, different state, different decade. The subject line, the police said nobody lived there. That one was about a house across from a school, a beat-up looking place that kids joked about, except the narrator didn't joke. They described the walk home in 6th grade like it was happening in real time. Crosswalk button clicking, the smell of wet leaves stuck to the curb, distant traffic on a main road, the way a quiet street can make your footsteps sound too loud. They wrote about a silhouette in a window, motionless, watching, day after day. Then the figure wasn't in the window anymore. It was on the porch, and the story snapped into a chase. Short, fast, messy. The narrator ducking into an alley, hiding behind a dumpster that stank so bad they thought they'd gag. The man's footsteps stopping at the alley mouth. The mumbling, the breathing close enough to feel like the air shifted. And then, police. An update the next day. The house had been vacant for years. I leaned back in my chair after reading that, and for a second I just listened to my room. The neon sign outside the pizza place across the street buzzed with that uneven electrical whine. My computer fan spun up and down like it was breathing. The little desk AC unit clicked on, then off, as if it couldn't decide whether it was working. Somewhere in the building, an elevator dinged and then the doors clanked shut. Normal sounds, nothing scary. Still, I found myself staring at my window like I expected a face to be there. I told myself it was just my brain doing what brains do, connecting dots, looking for patterns. I get hundreds of stories around Halloween. Of course, there'd be overlap. Then the third email arrived. No subject line, just a file and a message that started with, "This happened last October at a pumpkin patch." It was the most normal setup of the three. After school, friends, cold, crisp air, rows of pumpkins, families laughing, a stand selling baked goods, a wagon squeaking as it rolled. And then, near the tree line, where the patch thinned out and the crowd noise faded, there was a figure. At first, the narrator thought it was a scarecrow. Then they noticed it was too thin, too still. The hat shifted slightly, like something underneath it was breathing. They wrote about the way the shadows thickened as the sun dropped. How one branch snap sounded like a gunshot because everything else was so quiet. They wrote about turning around and seeing the figure 10 feet behind them. And here's the part that made my throat go dry. They didn't say it walked. They said it glided. They ran back toward the crowd, leaves crunching behind them faster than they should have. When they reached the main area, the figure stopped at the edge like it had a boundary it wouldn't cross. A few days later, the narrator read an online report. Someone else had seen it too. Same spot, same late afternoon light, same unnatural stillness. By the time I finished the third email, it was after midnight. The street outside was mostly quiet. The neon hum was softer now, like it was further away. My AC unit clicked again. I reached for my water bottle, took a sip, and felt the cold plastic against my palm. And that's when I did something I don't usually do. I opened all 3 submissions side by side on my monitor. I started highlighting phrases, not the big dramatic ones, the small ones. Orange streetlight glow, no footsteps, eyes catching light, different people, different places, different situations, same details. That's not proof of anything. I know that. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's just the language of fear, the way we describe being watched when we can't explain why we felt wrong. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. All 3 stories share the same progression. A familiar place turns quiet. A figure appears and doesn't move. It gets closer without sound. And when someone else should be able to confirm it, it's gone. I stared at the highlighted lines until my eyes hurt. Then I minimized the emails and turned off my desk lamp, letting my office fall into the glow of the monitor. In the dark, the hum of my PC fan sounded louder. The air felt colder. I could hear my own breathing. And somewhere, very faintly, I heard a soft, deliberate tapping. Not from outside my window, from the hallway. Just once. Then again. Tap, tap, tap. Like someone testing whether I was still awake. It was early October. The kind of early October where the air still pretends it's summer during the day. But the moment the sun drops, the cold shows up like it's been waiting in the wings. I was a kid then, still young enough to believe a visit could fix anything. Still naive enough to think adults didn't carry their anger around like invisible backpacks. My parents had been divorced for 2 years. In kid time, that's forever. Forever is when you stop asking questions at dinner. Forever is when you learn which parent is going to pick you up and which one isn't. Forever is when you recognize a certain tightness in your dad's jaw before he ever says a word. We lived with him. My mom lived somewhere else, an apartment across town in a part of the city my dad never drove through unless he had to. We barely saw her. Not because we didn't want to, Because life does this slow, mean thing where it rearranges adults and the kids just get carried along. That weekend, my dad decided we were going. He didn't say it like a gift. He said it like a responsibility he was honoring. He got us into the car after dinner, 4 of us, packed in the back seat in a familiar tangle of knees and backpacks and cheap hoodie fabric. My sister Jess, the oldest, sat by the window like she always did, watching streetlights flick past. My brothers, Mike and Eli, argued over nothing in that low-energy way siblings do when they're tired, but too excited to shut up. I sat in the middle, pressed between them, feeling the car's vinyl seat stick to the backs of my legs. Outside, the sky had the bruised purple look it gets in fall. The radio played soft static between stations because my dad never took the time to tune it. The air vents blew lukewarm air that smelled faintly like dust. Every time we stopped at a light, the headlights behind us painted the car interior white, then red, then white again, like a slow heartbeat. My dad didn't talk much. He gripped the steering wheel with both hands, knuckles pale, eyes fixed straight ahead. The only sound he made was the occasional click of the turn signal, sharp and patient. Jess leaned toward me once and whispered, "Just be good, okay?" That's the thing about being the oldest. She was half kid, half substitute adult. She didn't say it like a threat. She said it like a prayer. When we finally reached my mom's neighborhood, the streets got narrower, darker. The businesses disappeared. The sidewalks looked more cracked, more tired. There were clusters of cars parked too close together, bumper to bumper, like the street couldn't breathe. Some houses had porch lights, some didn't. And in between them were empty gaps. Lots where grass grew wild, chain-link fences bent inward, and trash drifted along the curb like it belonged there. My dad slowed down, scanning. The address didn't mean anything to me, but it meant something to him. I could tell by the way his eyes moved, left, right, left, like he was looking for a landmark that would prove we hadn't made a mistake. Then we turned, and the alley appeared. It wasn't just a side street. It was a service lane, long and narrow, flanked by the backs of buildings and dumpsters and utility poles. The kind of alley you don't drive down unless you're delivering something or hiding something. The kind of alley that smells like damp concrete and old grease even when the air is cold. The headlights from our car poured into it and stopped halfway, swallowed by distance. Somewhere in the darkness, a stray cat darted across, fast and low, a black streak that vanished before my brain could fully register it. My stomach tightened, though I didn't have words for why. I remember Jess going quiet beside the window. I remember Mike's voice lowering a little. Even Eli, who could find a way to laugh in a dentist's office, stopped talking for a second. My dad drove down the alley anyway, slow, tires crunching over gravel. The sound echoed between the walls. It felt louder than it should have, like the alley was amplifying everything. At the far end, it opened into an apartment complex that looked almost hidden from the outside. Multiple buildings packed in close, stairwells climbing up to second floors, balconies with old patio chairs and laundry hung over railings. There were a lot of windows. Some had TVS flickering behind curtains. Some were dark. Some had blinds half open like eyes that didn't fully close. It was crowded and yet empty. That was the strangest part. There were cars in the lot, sedans and beat-up SUVs, a couple of trucks with dents and rust. But there weren't people. No one walking a dog. No one smoking outside. No kids riding bikes. The air felt held, like the whole place was listening. Tall lampposts stood around the parking lot, throwing down a rusty orange light that made everything look dirty even when it wasn't. It wasn't the warm yellow of a porch light. It was the kind of orange you see in old sodium streetlights, the kind that turns skin sickly and shadows too sharp. My mom met us at the bottom of the stairs, like she'd been waiting in place for a long time. She was small. That's always the first thing I think of. Small and bundled in a sweater, hair pulled back, eyes tired but bright when she saw us. The second she hugged me, I got hit with the smell of her. Laundry detergent, faint perfume, and something cooked earlier. Maybe onions, maybe garlic, maybe just the ghost of dinner clinging to the air around her. "Look at you," she said, as if we'd all grown an inch in the drive over. "Oh my God, come here." We climbed the stairs to her apartment. The stairwell was concrete, cold, and smelled like old cigarettes even though no one was smoking. My sneakers made hollow sounds on each step. The handrail was metal and colder than I expected, like it had been holding the night in it. Inside her apartment, everything changed. It was warm, cozy, soft furniture, blankets draped over the couch, little decorations everywhere that didn't match, but somehow made sense because she'd chosen them. A fake plant in the corner. Family photos that looked older than they should have. A cluttered coffee table with magazines and a candle that wasn't lit. The fridge hummed steadily in the kitchen with that slightly too loud motor sound, and the air conditioner in the window made a faint rattling noise like it was struggling to keep up with the season. My mom fussed over us. Food, drinks, making sure we took off our shoes, making sure we didn't track in dirt from the stairwell. She tried to make it normal. She tried hard. We spent the first hour just being kids again, spread across the living room floor with snacks and TV noise. My dad stayed long enough to exchange a few words at the door. Polite, tight, controlled. Then he left. The door shut behind him with a dull click that felt louder than it should have. After he was gone, my mom's shoulders dropped like she'd been holding them up for days. "Okay," she said, clapping her hands once like she was starting a shift. "So, what do you want to do?" That's when the knock came. Not at her door, at the door below. Someone calling up the stairwell. "Zach!" the kid's voice yelled. "You home?" Jess and I drifted to the window out of curiosity. I pressed my forehead against the glass and looked down into the parking lot. The orange streetlight glow made everything look like an old photograph. Two kids stood near the bottom stairwell. A boy and a girl, about our ages. The boy had that restless energy kids get when they're bored and looking for trouble in the harmless sense. The girl stood close, hugging her arms against the cold. I recognized them. Zach and Chi-Chi. The first time we'd visited months earlier, they'd approached us like we were long-lost friends. Kids do that when they don't have a lot of choice. The complex didn't offer many options. If new kids showed up, you made them your world for the weekend. We ran down to meet them. The cold hit us the moment we stepped outside. It smelled like dry leaves and concrete. Somewhere far away, a car alarm chirped once and then shut up. A screen door slammed in one of the buildings and echoed across the lot. Zach grinned when he saw us. "You're back!" Chi-Chi waved with both hands like she was excited and nervous at the same time. "Hi." We talked for a few minutes. Fast, overlapping kid talk, school, how long we were staying, whether we could come out later. Zach's eyes flicked toward the alley mouth, then back to us, like he was checking the darkness out of habit. "It's October," he said, with the kind of reverence kids reserve for holidays. "We should play hide and seek tonight." Mike's face lit up. Eli did a little bounce like he couldn't help himself. Jess raised an eyebrow, pretending she was too mature for it, but she smiled anyway. Where? Outside, Zach said, like it was obvious. At 9, when it's really dark. The lamppost above us buzzed softly, electrical and steady. The orange light made Zach's smile look slightly strange, like it belonged to someone else. At 9, he repeated. Everybody comes out. No parents, just us. No parents. That was the hook. That was the magic phrase that made it feel like we were stepping into something secret. We all agreed without thinking about the alleyway, without thinking about the shadows, without thinking about how fast October night can swallow a place. We went back upstairs to wait. And when the clock finally crawled toward 9, I kept checking the window, staring down at the parking lot as the light outside deepened from dusk to full dark. The streetlights didn't brighten the world so much as stain it orange. The corners of buildings became thicker, blacker. The alley mouth at the edge of the complex looked like a cut in the shape of the night, an opening that didn't belong there. At exactly 9, Zach stood beneath the lamppost and called up softly, "Ready?" We crept outside, all of us like we were sneaking out even though we weren't. Jess pulled her hoodie tighter. Mike cracked his knuckles like he was getting ready for a sport. Eli wouldn't stop grinning. We gathered near the center of the lot, under the orange glow, and did the stupid little chant kids use to pick who's it. Bubblegum, bubblegum in a dish. The words sounded different at night. Smaller, thinner, like the dark was absorbing them. And when the chant landed on Zach, he groaned dramatically, turned toward the building, and started counting with his hands over his eyes. The rest of us scattered. Jess grabbed my wrist. "Stick with me," she whispered, and pulled me toward the edge of the complex, the side that led into the alley. We ran past the last lamppost, past where the light fell off, toward the long, narrow mouth of the service lane, where the darkness waited like it had been expecting us. The moment we stepped into the alley, the sound changed. It wasn't just quieter. It was like someone turned the world's volume down. The parking lot behind us, its distant laughter, its humming lights, its faint life, became muffled, as if we'd shut a heavy door. Our footsteps echoed once, then softened. Even our breathing sounded wrong, trapped close to our faces. Jess slowed, and I felt her grip tighten again, not playful this time. We were still just playing a game. But the alley didn't feel like part of the game. It felt like we'd crossed into some place that didn't care what we were pretending. And we kept going anyway. Jess didn't run like she was having fun anymore. She ran like she wanted distance. The alley pulled us in the deeper we went. The walls on both sides were close enough that the darkness didn't feel open. It felt pressed in, like the night had weight. On the left was the backside of the apartment building. Stained stucco, narrow windows with blinds drawn, a rusty metal staircase that climbed toward a second-floor landing. On the right was a line of things nobody wanted to look at too long. Dumpsters, stacked pallets, a leaning fence, a tangle of electrical conduit and cables stapled into the wall like veins. Every few steps, my shoe scuffed something gritty. Gravel, glass, dry leaves that had blown in and gotten trapped. The air was colder here and it smelled wrong, like sour trash and damp cement. Not the sweet, crisp smell of fall leaves you get on a normal street. This was heavier, stale, as if the alley never fully aired out. Halfway down, the sound of the parking lot behind us faded to almost nothing. I could still tell it existed, like hearing a party through a wall. But the alley swallowed the details. The lampposts behind us turned the entrance into a faint orange rectangle. Everything past that was darkness and the weak glow of one distant light near the far end. Jess guided us to the spot she remembered from earlier visits, behind the large garbage tins near the back corner of the building. They weren't the small residential bins. They were big metal dumpsters with lids that sat at an angle, greasy streaks down the sides, and a smell that hit you even through the cold air. We ducked behind them. The lid above us rattled slightly, shifting in a breeze I couldn't feel on my skin. The metal made a soft scraping sound, like it was trying to settle. My heart thumped harder in response, irrationally, like noise itself was dangerous. Jess pressed a finger to her lips. We crouched, knees tucked in, backs against the cold metal. I could feel the vibration of the alley through it. Tiny movements, the faint hum of something electrical nearby. Somewhere, a window air conditioner droned steadily. Not loud, but constant, the way an AC unit sounds when you're close enough to hear the motor working. It wasn't from our building. It had to be from one of the other units facing the alley. The sound made a thin line of normal through the darkness, and I clung to it without realizing. Farther away, almost like a memory, TV audio echoed. A laugh track, a burst of muffled dialogue. It drifted through the alley and got warped by distance, turning into something half human, half static. Then it would disappear, swallowed by the walls again. Zach's voice floated from somewhere back toward the parking lot. "Ready or not, here I come!" The words should have been exciting. They should have made me grin. They should have made the game feel real again. Instead, in the alley, his voice sounded thin and far away, like it belonged to someone in another building, another world. For the first minute, I held my breath like that would help. My lungs burned slightly. My cheeks felt cold. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, hard and fast, a drum that wouldn't shut up. I whispered, "He's not gonna come all the way down here." Jess didn't answer right away. She was listening. I listened too, trying to pick out footsteps, Zach's sneakers, Mike's heavy stomp, Chi-Chi's lighter steps. Something. At first there was nothing but the AC hum and the occasional distant TV sound. Then I heard a faint clink, metal against metal, somewhere farther down the alley. I froze instantly. Jess's eyes flicked toward the sound. It happened again. A tiny metallic tick, then silence. Maybe it was a loose lid. Maybe it was wind. Maybe it was a raccoon or a stray cat. But my brain didn't like it. The longer we waited, the less it felt like hide and seek, and the more it felt like we were hiding from something that wasn't part of the game. The excitement bled out of me and left behind the uncomfortable awareness of where we were. The smell, the darkness, the fact that no one could see us here. I shifted my weight, and the gravel under my shoe made a soft crunch. I flinched at my own noise. Jess leaned close enough that I could feel her whisper on my ear. "Stop moving. I'm bored," I whispered back, trying to sound annoyed, trying to stay in kid mode. "Just wait," she said. We waited. Time in an alley at night moves wrong. It stretches. It makes you count seconds without meaning to. I stared at the thin strip of light near the alley entrance, orange glow reflecting off damp concrete, and tried to imagine Zach's face, the way he'd laugh when he found someone. I tried to make the scene playful in my head, but the alley kept pushing back. Somewhere above us, a fluorescent light inside a stairwell flickered once, then steadied. The brief stutter of brightness made my stomach flip. For half a second, I could see more of the alley, cracks in the wall, stains on the concrete, the edges of the dumpster lids, and then it dimmed again, and the darkness filled in the gaps like water. Jess let out a slow breath, like she'd been holding hers too. "This is stupid," I whispered. We hid too good. She suppressed a laugh, but it sounded forced. Maybe. Another minute passed. Maybe 2. I couldn't tell anymore. The AC unit kept buzzing like a machine that didn't care. The TV laughter floated again, hollow and warped. Somewhere a car drove by on a distant street, and the sound of tires on pavement reached us only as a soft hiss. Jess shifted her knees and winced like they were starting to hurt. "Okay," she murmured. "Let's go. It's late." Relief washed through me so fast it felt like warmth. We eased up from our crouch, careful not to scrape our shoes too loudly on the concrete. Jess put a hand on the dumpster edge for balance and leaned out first, checking the alley like she was scouting. "Come on," she whispered. We stepped out from behind the dumpsters, and the air changed. Not temperature, not smell, something else. A pressure. The sense that the alley had become aware of us the moment we moved. We walked a few steps, trying to move quietly through the scattered trash bags in the shadowed corner. Then I looked down the alley toward the far end. At first my brain didn't process it, because the figure was standing in a pool of light, one of those orange lamplights, weak and dingy, casting a cone onto the pavement. The figure was perfectly still, like a cutout, like a mannequin someone had placed there for a prank. But it wasn't shaped like a mannequin. It was tall, too tall. The legs looked long in a way that didn't match a normal adult stance. The shoulders were high. The head was angled slightly forward, as if it was looking down the length of the alley. At us. I stopped so suddenly that Jess bumped into my side. "What?" she started. Then she saw what I was seeing and her voice died. The light above the figure created harsh shadows. The face was mostly obscured, dark beneath the brow, dark beneath whatever hair was on top. I couldn't see skin tone. I couldn't see features. I could only see the shape of a head and the suggestion of a mouth that might not even have been a mouth. And yet I knew, with that instant kid's certainty, that it was looking at me. Not past me, not around me, at me. My throat tightened. A cold prickled at the back of my neck. It felt like when you realize someone's been standing behind you and you didn't know. For a second, my brain tried to make it make sense. Maybe it was someone tall from the complex. Maybe it was a parent looking for their kid. Maybe it was a maintenance worker. Then another detail slid into focus, like my eyes were adjusting. The hair. It wasn't normal hair. It was big, an exaggerated round shape, like an afro that didn't belong on a real person's head, and it wasn't one color. Under the orange light, it looked mottled, bright in patches, dark in others, like cheap costume fibers catching light unevenly, a clown wig. The thought hit me hard enough that my stomach dropped, because it wasn't Halloween. It wasn't even close enough for someone to be out here dressed like that, as a harmless joke. And even if it were Halloween, it didn't explain why someone would be standing at the far end of an alley, alone, in silence, like they'd been placed there. The figure didn't wave. It didn't step forward. It didn't speak. It just stood there, still as a signpost, the light above it buzzing faintly, eyes hidden in shadow. Jess grabbed my wrist so tight it hurt, the same grip she used when crossing a busy street. "No," she whispered, and I could hear the fear in her voice now, raw and unfiltered. "We're not doing this." I didn't argue. I couldn't. Because in that moment, it didn't feel like a game anymore. It felt like we had stumbled onto something that had been waiting in the dark, long before we arrived. And it had been waiting in exactly the one place we couldn't pretend was safe. Jess didn't let go of my wrist. She pulled me back the way we came. Not running yet, running felt like permission, but moving fast enough that my shoes slid on the damp concrete. My eyes kept snapping backward, and every time I looked, the figure at the end of the alley was still there in the orange cone of light, tall and unmoving, like it had been nailed into place. I expected, stupidly, to hear something. A laugh, a call, a footstep, a zipper, anything that would prove it was a person doing something normal. But the alley gave us nothing. No footsteps behind us, no rustle of costume fabric, just that distant air conditioner drone and the warped TV sound that faded in and out like it couldn't decide if it existed. The silence made it worse, because silence is what you get right before something happens. Jess's breath was quick and shallow. I could feel it in the way her arm trembled slightly as she dragged me along. "Don't look," she whispered. Of course I looked, because if it moved and I didn't see it, my brain would explode with what-ifs. We passed the dumpsters again. The lids were still crooked, still greasy. The smell hit my nose harder now, like fear sharpened it. The alley entrance ahead looked like a doorway back to normal life. An orange rectangle where the lampposts in the parking lot stained the pavement and the building corners. The moment we crossed out of the alley's shadow, the world got louder. Not loud like a party, just restored. The faint hum of the streetlight overhead, a distant car passing on a road somewhere beyond the complex, a TV in a second-floor window playing a commercial. It was like someone turned the volume back up from mute to low. And right there near the corner of the building, we saw Mike and Chi-Chi. They were half hiding, half laughing, like kids do when they've forgotten hide and seek is supposed to be quiet. Mike had one shoulder against the wall, ready to bolt if Zach came around the corner. Chi-Chi was crouched near a stairwell, her knees hugged to her chest, eyes bright in the orange light. Mike saw us and frowned. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "You're supposed to be hiding." Jess didn't slow down. She dragged me straight up to them, still gripping my wrist like I was going to float away. "There's someone in the alley," she whispered. Mike snorted softly, like he thought we were trying to mess with him. "Zach?" "No," I said quickly. My voice came out too high, too thin. "Not Zach." Chi-Chi's smile fell. "What do you mean?" Jess glanced over her shoulder toward the alley mouth, then back at them. "A clown," she said, and even to me it sounded ridiculous coming out of her mouth. Mike stared. "A what?" "A clown," I repeated, and I hated how childish it sounded, like I was telling ghost stories. At the end of the alley, just standing there. Mike's eyes flicked toward the alley entrance. He squinted into the darkness like he expected to see Zach laughing. "You're lying," he said, but his voice wasn't confident. Chi-Chi was already pushing herself up from her crouch, eyes fixed on Jess's face as if she could read truth there. "Where?" Jess lifted her chin toward the alley mouth. "Down there." The four of us moved as one, inching closer to the edge of the light without fully stepping into the alley again. The orange streetlight above us buzzed faintly, electrical and steady. The parking lot behind us felt too open, too exposed. There were cars parked in neat, crooked lines. A shopping cart sat abandoned near the curb, one wheel turned sideways like a broken ankle. A balcony above had a porch chair with a blanket draped over it, moving slightly in the breeze. Normal things, ordinary things. We leaned just enough to see down the alley. At first, I thought Jess and I had made it up. I thought maybe fear had painted a person into the darkness, and now that we were out here under the lamplight, the alley would be empty. But then Chi-Chi inhaled sharply through her teeth. "There," she whispered. The figure was still visible at the far end, except it wasn't at the far end anymore. It was closer, not by a foot, not by two. Closer, like it had crossed a chunk of distance while we were walking out of the alley, and it had done it without sound. It now stood in a different patch of light, nearer to the middle, where a dimmer lamppost threw a weaker orange cone onto the pavement. My skin prickled. I stared hard at the figure, trying to catch it moving, trying to prove to myself that it had just been an optical trick. It didn't move. It simply occupied a closer place, as if the world had rearranged around it. Mike shifted his weight nervously. "Okay," he muttered, still trying to sound brave. "Maybe it's just some guy, like someone's dad." Jess didn't respond. Chi-Chi took a small step back, the heel of her sneaker scraping the asphalt. Her eyes were wide, and then the figure lifted its hand. It waved, slowly, deliberately, like it recognized us, like it had been expecting us to look back. The wave was wrong, not friendly, not playful. It was the kind of gesture you'd do to a child across a playground if you wanted them to come closer. My stomach turned. The light shifted just enough as it waved that I saw its face more clearly. There was no normal clown makeup, no red nose, no painted smile. The entire face looked black, like it had been painted over in matte dark paint, or covered with some kind of cloth that swallowed light. The only features that stood out were the eyes, because they caught the streetlight. Two small points of shine, not the wide, goofy eyes of a costume. These looked focused, quiet, present. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. Mike whispered, "What the?" And then Chi-Chi screamed. Not a little yelp, not a startled squeak, a full scream that cut through the complex like a siren. We all snapped our heads toward her. Her arm was outstretched, finger shaking, pointing not down the alley, but to our left, toward the shadows between buildings. "There's another one," she shrieked. "There's another person watching us." My body reacted before my brain caught up. I turned so fast my neck hurt. At first I saw only darkness, corners of buildings, stairwell shadows, the underside of a balcony. Then my eyes adjusted, and the shape separated itself from the black. A second figure. It stood near the side of the building, just outside the brightest pool of lamplight, where the orange glow faded into shadow. It was taller than the first. The legs looked impossibly long, like it had been stretched. The posture was loose, casual, the way someone stands when they've been there for a while. And the hair, if you could call it hair, was green. Bright, unnatural green, like cheap costume fiber under dirty streetlight. This one didn't wave. It didn't need to. It was positioned in a way that made my brain do an instant map of escape routes. Stairs up to our apartment, down the sidewalk, back toward the alley, across the lot between parked cars. Every direction now felt wrong, because the first clown was in the alley, between us and the darker part of the complex, and the second clown was to the side, near the building, cutting off the most obvious path across the lot. We weren't surrounded in the dramatic movie sense. No one had grabbed us. No one had said a word. But the geometry of the moment made my skin go cold. We were being arranged. Mike's face went white in the orange light. The tough act fell right off him. His lips parted, but nothing came out. Jess pulled me backward, one step, then another, her grip on my wrist now painful. "Run," she breathed. And it wasn't a suggestion, it was instinct. Chi-Chi bolted first, sprinting toward her stairwell with her arms pumping hard, hair flying behind her. Mike hesitated for half a heartbeat, torn between pride and panic. Then he took off after her, shoes slapping against asphalt, breath already ragged. Jess yanked me with her. We ran toward our building's stairs. The parking lot blurred. The orange light stretched across the ground in long, ugly shadows. My shoes hit a patch of gravel and skidded. I almost went down, but Jess kept dragging me, her grip like a chain. I risked one look back. The first clown in the alley hadn't chased us. It hadn't sprinted. It hadn't even leaned forward. It was simply closer again. No footsteps, no sound, just nearer. The second clown stood near the building, head tilted slightly, like it was watching which direction we chose. Its green hair glowed faintly under the streetlight, bright as poison. No one shouted at us. No one laughed. That was the worst part. If they had chased us, if they had screamed something, if they had acted like human threats, maybe my brain could have filed it under some creep trying to scare kids. But they didn't. They just watched us run. Like they'd already won something, and the running was only the part where we proved we understood the rules. We hit the bottom of the stairs and nearly tripped over each other, hands grabbing the cold metal railing. The stairwell light above buzzed harshly, making everything look too bright and too exposed. Jess hauled me up the steps, two at a time. Behind us, the parking lot stayed quiet. No pounding footsteps following. No heavy breathing. Only the steady buzz of the streetlight, the distant hum of an air conditioner, and the echo of our own shoes on concrete as we fled. Fleeing from two motionless clowns who didn't need to run to make us feel trapped. We hit the stairwell like it was a finish line. Jess hauled me up the steps, two at a time. Her hand clamped around my wrist so hard it left a heat imprint. The metal railing was cold and slick under my palm, and the concrete steps gave off that damp basement smell, like rain had seeped into the building and never fully left. Above us, a fluorescent light buzzed with that harsh, insect-like vibration you hear more than you see. It cast a pale, sickly glow over the stairwell, too white, too flat, making everyone's skin look drained. The light flickered once as we passed under it, and for half a second my brain did the stupid thing it does in fear, where it expects the world to change in the dark between blinks. But nothing changed, except my breathing. I was sucking air too fast, the kind of breath that makes your throat burn. My lungs felt tight, like they couldn't expand all the way. Every inhale came with a faint whistle, and I hated that sound because it felt loud, like it could travel back down the stairs and tell anyone listening exactly where we were. Jess shoved the door to the second-floor landing open, and it slammed behind us with a hollow, echoing boom that bounced off the concrete and traveled down the stairwell like a thrown object. The hallway on the second floor was narrow and straight, lined with identical doors, cheap wood, scuffed at the bottom, with small brass numbers nailed on. The carpet was thin and worn, flattened where hundreds of shoes had walked it. Somewhere down the hall, someone was cooking something oily. The smell clung to the air. Fried food, spices, old grease. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed continuously, the sound filling the hallway with a constant electric whine. It made the silence impossible. It made the whole place feel like it was vibrating. Jess didn't slow down. She dragged me toward our mom's door, and I stumbled because my legs were suddenly shaky, like my body had spent its energy running and now wanted to collapse. We burst inside. Warm air hit my face. The apartment smelled like soft laundry detergent and leftover dinner. The sound changed too. The fridge's steady hum, the faint rattle of the window AC, the muffled quiet of a space meant for living. And then, almost immediately, the illusion of safety tried to settle over us. Like, we're inside now. The door is closed. We're fine. But my heart wouldn't believe it. Eli was already in the living room. He was standing close to our mom, like he'd been pulled into her orbit. Her arms were wrapped around him, and he looked like he'd been crying or close to it. Eyes glossy, cheeks flushed, breathing uneven. Zach was there too, standing just a few feet away, shoulders up around his ears, like he was bracing for something. His face had lost all of its earlier confidence. Our mom's head snapped toward us the moment we came in. "What happened?" she said, the words sharp with panic. "Why are you—" Jess tried to talk first, but her voice came out tangled. There was... I could only stand there and shake my head, because the images were stacked in my mind like cards. The alley, the tall figure, the black face, the eyes, the second clown in the shadow. My mom looked between us, her gaze landing on my wrist where Jess's fingers were still clamped tight. "Jess," she said, softer but more serious. "Let go of him." Jess released me like she hadn't realized she was holding on at all. My skin ached where her nails had pressed. Eli spoke before any of us could. His voice was small, cracked. "It looked at me," he said. My mom pulled him closer instantly. Her hand went to the back of his head the way adults do when a kid is too young to carry their own fear. "Honey," she murmured, "slow down. Tell me what happened." Eli swallowed hard. His eyes flicked toward the window as if he expected something to be there, then back to our mom's face. "I was hiding," he said, "in the courtyard, like behind the bushes." His hands were shaking slightly. I'd never seen Eli like that. He was the kind of kid who would climb too high and laugh, who'd run into trouble just to see what it looked like. Fear didn't fit him. It looked wrong on him, like a coat that wasn't his size. "I heard footsteps," he continued, "like right there. And I thought it was Zach, because he was the seeker." Zach nodded slowly, not speaking. Eli's voice sped up, rushing to get the words out before the memory caught up with him. "So I got lower behind the bush, and I was holding my breath, and the footsteps were closer, like someone was walking straight to me." He looked down at his hands, as if he could still feel the leaves and dirt under them. "And then I heard Zach," he said, "but it was from the other side." My stomach tightened. Because hide and seek doesn't do that. The seeker doesn't split into two voices. Eli's eyes lifted and locked on my mom's face. He called my name. Zach did, like from behind me. Zach's mouth tightened. He still didn't say anything, but his face had gone pale, the orange streetlight fear replaced by something colder inside. Eli swallowed again. "So I thought maybe he was trying to trick me, like he was moving around. But then," his voice dropped into a whisper. "I looked up." The way he said it made my skin prickle. "I looked up, and it was right there." Eli whispered. "Not Zach. Someone else. A clown." Jess made a sound, sharp and involuntary. My mom's expression didn't change much. She was holding it steady on purpose, but her hand tightened on Eli's shoulder. Eli nodded quickly, like he needed her to believe him before he could keep talking. "It was leaning over," he said, like it was looking down at me, and I couldn't see its face right because it was dark, but I could see The hair and the eyes. The eyes. My throat went dry. Eli's voice trembled. And then Zach yelled again, like, "I found you." And I didn't even think. I just ran. I ran, and I didn't stop until I got to Zach's apartment. Zach finally spoke, his voice low. He was shaking, he said. He wouldn't talk at first. He just kept looking back at the courtyard. My mom looked at us. "And you?" she asked. And her voice was calm now in a way that felt forced, like she was setting her fear aside to be useful. Jess took a breath, steadied herself the way she always did when she had to be the oldest. "Me and him went down the alley," she said, pointing at me. "We hid behind the dumpsters. Then when we came out, there was a clown at the end of the alley. It was tall. It just stood there. And then there were two," I added, because Jess's calm was starting to crack around the edges. My mom didn't ask why we were playing hide and seek at night. She didn't scold us for going into the alley. That should tell you something about the kind of neighborhood this was. Adults there didn't waste time pretending danger couldn't happen. They just dealt with it when it showed up. She moved fast after that. She locked the front door. Then she latched the deadbolt. Then she slid the chain lock into place even though we were on the second floor, and that chain felt like a joke. She checked the window locks, one by one. Kitchen, living room, bedroom, pressing each latch until it clicked, then tugging lightly like she didn't trust the click. The blinds came down. She yanked them closed with a snap, and the slats rattled, echoing briefly through the apartment like a tiny thunderstorm. "Everybody inside," she said. Not loud, not hysterical, just absolute. "No more going out, not tonight." Mike and Chi-Chi weren't with us. Chi-Chi had run to her own apartment downstairs, and Mike had followed her to make sure she got inside. But I kept imagining them in the stairwell, running under the buzzing fluorescent light, and I hated that my brain couldn't stop. Our mom gave us all a hug, quick, hard squeezes that felt more like counting than comforting. When she hugged me, I could feel her heartbeat through her sweater, fast and thudding. She tried to hide it, but I felt it. "Okay," she said finally, smoothing Eli's hair back. "It's done. It's over. You're safe. Go to bed." The word safe sounded wrong. Jess shot me a look like, "Don't argue, don't make it worse. Just do what she says." So we did. We went into the small bedroom, Jess and I, Mike and Eli later when he came up. We changed into pajamas with hands that still wouldn't stop shaking. We climbed into bed like we were obeying, like we were normal, like we hadn't just seen something that didn't belong in the world. I stared at the ceiling in the dark. The apartment noises seemed louder now. Fridge humming, the AC unit rattling, pipes clicking as they cooled. Somewhere outside, a distant car alarm chirped twice and died. Time passed in weird chunks. I'd drift toward sleep and then jerk awake to the sound of my own heart. At some point, the hallway outside went quiet too. No footsteps, no voices, just the constant low buzz of the building's electricity. And that's when I heard it. Not a bang, not a crash, a tap. Soft, precise. At first I thought it was the blinds shifting in a breeze, but the blinds weren't moving. They were closed tight. Tap, tap. A pause long enough for me to question if it was real. Then again, tap, tap. It wasn't loud enough to be obviously dangerous. It wasn't random enough to be nothing. It was the kind of sound that feels intentional, like someone with patience, someone who didn't need to break in, someone who just wanted you to know they were there. I held my breath and listened, frozen in my bed, staring into the dark. The tapping came once more, gentle as a fingernail on glass. Then it stopped, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any scream. The tapping stopped, but it didn't leave. That's the thing about certain sounds. Once your brain marks them as important, they echo even after they're gone. I lay there in the dark, staring at the faint outline of the bedroom ceiling, listening so hard my ears hurt. I could hear everything that normally blended into the background. The refrigerator's steady motor hum, the window AC's occasional rattle, the soft tick of pipes cooling inside the walls. Somewhere down the hallway, a neighbor's television murmured low, a single voice rising and falling as if someone had fallen asleep mid-show. Jess was in the bed beside me, breathing shallowly. I could tell she wasn't asleep either. Every so often, she shifted the slightest amount, and the mattress springs gave a tiny squeak. Each squeak made my stomach tighten, like noise itself could attract attention. I don't know how long I lay there like that. In my memory, it feels like an hour, like the night stretched out and held me in place. But it might have been 10 minutes. It might have been 30. Time was slippery. Eventually, my mouth felt dry enough that it became the only thing I could focus on. That stupid, simple human need, water, cut through fear the way it sometimes does, and I told myself it was fine. The apartment was quiet. The door was locked. We were on the second floor. Nothing could be outside our window. Second floor. The phrase became a charm in my head, like repeating it would turn it true. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could, stepping onto the carpet in my socks. The room was dark, but I knew the layout. I knew where the toys were piled, where a shoe might have been left near the doorway. I moved slow, careful, trying not to wake my brothers. Mike had finally come in and fallen asleep in that heavy, exhausted way kids do after adrenaline drains out. Eli's breathing was uneven, like he'd cried himself tired. I eased the bedroom door open. The hinge gave a tiny creak. I froze, breath held, waiting for my mom to call out, for someone to stir, for anything. But the apartment stayed still. I stepped into the hallway. The living room was dim, lit only by the blue-green glow of the microwave clock from the kitchen. That digital display, those cheap LED numbers, looked bright in the dark, like a small, artificial moon. I could see the outline of the couch, the shadow of the coffee table cluttered with magazines, the shape of the blinds closed tight against the night. The refrigerator hummed on, steady and low, and I found myself clinging to that sound because it was proof the world was still normal. Machines didn't get scared. Machines didn't imagine clowns. I patted across the tile, and the cold seeped straight through my socks. The kitchen floor always felt colder than the rest of the apartment, like the tile held onto the night. I hated it. It made me feel exposed, like I'd stepped into a place not meant for bare feet at midnight. I opened the fridge. The interior light flared bright white, harsh in the darkness. It illuminated everything too clearly. Plastic containers, a half-empty milk jug, a bag of baby carrots, soda cans lined up like little soldiers. I grabbed a bottle of water from the door shelf, and the cold plastic shocked my fingers. As I closed the fridge, the apartment dimmed again. The fridge hum returned to being the loudest sound. The microwave clock glowed patiently. I should have turned right back. I should have gone back to bed and swallowed my fear with the water. Instead, I heard it. Tap. Soft, controlled. I stood still, bottle in my hand, my throat suddenly too tight to swallow. Tap. Tap. The sound wasn't coming from the kitchen. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It came from the direction of the living room window. It sounded like a fingernail on glass. I stared at the blinds. My brain did what it always does when it's trying to protect itself. It offered explanations: wind, loose slats, a tree branch, a bird. But we were on the second floor. There were no trees close enough to hit the window. There was nothing outside that window except the parking lot and the alley mouth and the orange streetlights. And the tapping had a rhythm. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Not frantic, not angry. Patient. Like whoever or whatever was doing it didn't need to hurry. Second floor, I told myself again. Second floor means safe. Second floor means you can look out without worrying someone is right there. I took a step toward the living room. The bottle of water creaked softly in my grip as the plastic flexed. The sound made me flinch. I loosened my hand immediately, as if the bottle had betrayed me. The blinds were fully down. The slats were angled closed. My mom had yanked them shut earlier with that decisive snap. They were quiet now, perfectly still. Tap. This one was slightly louder, like a reminder. My heart beat hard enough to make my vision pulse. I stood there, frozen between the kitchen and the living room, and I could feel sweat forming under my hairline even though the apartment was cool. There was a childish part of me that wanted to run to my mom instantly. Wake her up, point, let her handle it. But there was another part, the curious part, the stupid part that only exists in kids because they haven't learned what adults already know. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is check, and I checked anyway. I moved closer to the window, one slow step at a time. The tiles seemed louder now, every shift of weight a soft, scraping sound. The fridge hum felt distant. The microwave clock glow felt colder. I reached the blinds and hesitated, fingers hovering over the bottom edge. The tapping stopped. That made it worse, because it felt like something had heard me approach, like it had paused on purpose. I held my breath and pinched the bottom of the blinds between my fingers. The plastic was slightly dusty. My fingertips slipped. I lifted the blinds just an inch. At first, I saw only orange light. The parking lot below was empty, washed in that rusty glow. Shadows lay in long bands between cars. The alley mouth was a black slice at the edge of the complex. Everything looked still, ordinary, safe. For half a second, relief flooded me so hard my knees felt weak. My brain tried to laugh at itself. See? Nothing, just a sound. Then I lifted the blinds another inch, and the clown was there, right there. So close the glass reflected a faint ghost image of my own face over it, like we were layered together. The face beyond the glass wasn't painted white with a red smile. It wasn't a normal clown face at all. It looked black, like someone had covered their skin in dark makeup or wore a black mask that swallowed the streetlight. The only thing that stood out were the eyes. They caught the light in tiny, sharp points, and they were locked on mine with a focus that didn't feel human. Not wide and goofy, not playful, not even angry, just watching. It felt like the world dropped out from under me, like my stomach fell through my feet. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My fingers locked around the blinds so hard the slats bent slightly, and the plastic creaked. The clown didn't bang on the window. It didn't grin. It didn't do anything theatrical. It simply stared. And I realized something in that instant that hit harder than the fear. It had been waiting for me to lift the blinds. The tapping wasn't to scare my mom. It wasn't to break in. It was a lure, a hook, a signal meant for one person, me, because I was the one awake, because I was the one who would look. My throat finally worked again, and the scream came out of me like a reflex, sharp and raw. I yanked the blinds down so hard the The slats slammed together and rattled like bones. The water bottle fell from my hand and hit the tile with a hollow thud, rolling away into the dark. I spun and ran. I didn't even think about where my feet were landing. I didn't think about toys or corners or walls. I just ran, my socks slipping on tile, my breath tearing out of my chest in panicked bursts. "Mom!" I screamed, the word cracking. "Mom!" The bedroom door flew open, and my mom was there instantly, like she'd never been asleep at all. Her hair was messy, her eyes wide, her face pale. She moved fast, bare feet on carpet, body already angled toward danger without knowing what it was. "What?" she demanded. "What is it?" I grabbed her arm, shaking so hard I could barely speak. "The window," I choked. "It's there! It's there!" My mom followed my pointing hand toward the living room. The blinds were down. The room was dark. The microwave clock glowed cold blue-green. The fridge hummed. And behind those blinds, on the other side of the glass, I knew, absolutely knew, that the clown had been looking straight at me with patient eyes, like it had all the time in the world, like it wasn't trying to break in, like it only wanted me to understand that it could reach me anyway. What makes the second-floor window so haunting isn't the clown itself. It's what the story says about fear when it becomes personal. The moment the narrator lifts the blinds, we realize this isn't a ghost story about something lurking out there. It's about the instant you discover that something out there already knows you exist. The fear becomes intimate. It's no longer about danger in general. It's about being seen. The story is powerful because it captures that fragile boundary between safety and exposure. The apartment should have been a sanctuary. It had locked doors, drawn blinds, the hum of ordinary machines that promise routine and normalcy. But all those little sounds, refrigerator buzz, AC clicks, distant laughter, transform once fear enters the room. They stop being background comfort and become reminders that silence is never empty. The ordinary world continues to hum while your private terror unfolds, indifferent and unbroken. At its core, this story is about false safety. The family does everything right. They run, they lock the door, they hide. Yet the threat finds them, not by breaking in, but by waiting patiently outside, asking for nothing more than a glance. That patience is what makes it terrifying. It's not a monster charging forward. It's a presence that already knows exactly where you sleep and can afford to wait. Fear here isn't in the noise. It's in the stillness. There's a quiet sadness, too, beneath the horror. The siblings' bond, the mother's instinct to protect, the fragile trust that being inside means being safe. All of it shatters in 1 second of eye contact. The clown doesn't harm them physically. It doesn't need to. Its victory is psychological. It replaces their sense of home with permanent doubt. From now on, every hum, every flicker of light, every tap against glass will carry the echo of that night. But there's something deeply human in the narrator's reaction. They're not just terrified. They look anyway. Curiosity and fear coexist in us because they both come from the same instinct, to understand what threatens us. The narrator's decision to lift the blinds isn't stupidity. It's courage of a kind. To confront what you fear, even for a heartbeat, is a moment of truth we all recognize. It's what makes the story linger after it ends. In the end, the second-floor window isn't only about being watched. It's about realizing how easily fear learns our habits, our routines, our hiding places. It's about that fragile moment when safety becomes an illusion and the ordinary world turns strange. So here's a question for you, the listener. If you heard that same soft tapping at your window tonight, steady, patient, almost polite, would you pull the blinds to look, or would you pretend not to hear it at all? I was 11 when it started. The kind of 11 where you still feel like a kid until the world reminds you that you're not invisible anymore. 6th grade, that weird middle ground year. You're old enough to be given little pieces of freedom, but still young enough that you don't know what to do with them, besides pretend you're not scared. You learn lockers and class schedules and how to laugh at jokes you don't fully understand yet. You start noticing the older kids, the way they move through hallways like they own them. You start noticing adults too, how some of them look right through you like you're part of the furniture. My school sat on the edge of a neighborhood that always felt slightly neglected, like the city had run out of attention before it reached that block. The building itself was fine. Brick, flat roof, chain link fence around the playground. But everything around it had a tired quality. Cracked sidewalks, a bus stop sign bent at the base, a crosswalk button that worked only if you pressed it hard enough and held it a second longer than you should have. And directly across the street from the school, on the corner where most of us had to walk past to get home, there was a house that looked like it had been forgotten on purpose. It wasn't the kind of creepy you see in movies. No overgrown vines swallowing the porch, no broken windows, no dramatic lightning. It was worse than that. It was realistic. It was the kind of house you'd drive by and feel your eyes slide off it because it made you uncomfortable in a quiet way. The paint was peeling in long, dry strips, exposing dull wood beneath like scabbed skin. The front lawn was dead, not winter dead, but permanently dead. A rough patchwork of dirt and yellow grass that never seemed to grow. The porch steps sagged slightly, and one corner of the railing leaned inward like it was tired of holding itself up. The blinds were always crooked, not fully closed, not fully open, slanted at odd angles, like someone had adjusted them with impatient hands and then walked away. As a kid, I couldn't understand it. I didn't understand how a place could look like that and still belong to someone. If you lived there, wouldn't you care? Wouldn't you at least mow the lawn? Wouldn't you repaint? Even if you were broke, even if life was hard, wouldn't you try? My friends didn't think about it that deeply. They made fun of it. Every afternoon when we walked out of school, backpacks bouncing, the smell of cafeteria food still clinging to our clothes, someone would point at the house and say something stupid. That's where a witch lives. That's where a serial killer hides bodies. That's where they keep the weird kids who get expelled. They'd laugh and shove each other and jog across the street like the joke made them brave. I never laughed. Not because I believed in witches. Not because I thought a serial killer lived there. I didn't have the imagination for that kind of horror yet. I was scared of something simpler. I was scared of the idea that someone might actually live there and be angry. Scared of an adult stepping out onto the porch and yelling. Scared of being caught making fun of their house. Scared of the kind of rage adults can unleash on kids because they can. It wasn't a heroic kind of fear. It was the kind of fear that makes you quiet and careful. So I'd scold my friends like I was their parent. Stop, I'd say. If someone lives there, they can hear you. Don't be rude. They'd roll their eyes and make fun of me instead. Dude, you're such a scaredy cat, one of them would say, laughing. No one lives there. Look at it. But at that point, I still wasn't walking home alone. Most days, I had at least one friend with me. We'd take the same route, cross at the same corner, cut past the same street, and the house would just be a background problem. A thing we joked about. and then forgot once we turned the corner. Everything changed in October. Not because the house changed. The house always looked dead. The house always looked like it belonged to nobody. October just made the whole world darker sooner, and when it gets dark sooner, you start seeing shadows where you didn't see them before. In October, my friends started staying after school. It wasn't because they suddenly loved education. They had clubs and sports and after-school programs. One had band practice, another had some tutoring thing. They'd wave goodbye and run back toward the building, and I'd be left standing by the front steps with my backpack straps cutting into my shoulders, watching them disappear through the doors. For the first few days, I didn't mind. It felt grown up, walking home alone, like I was being trusted. The route wasn't long, just a few blocks through a residential area. Cross at the corner, past the beat-up house. Keep going. The first time I walked alone in October, the air was cold enough to sting my nose. Fallen leaves were packed into the gutters and along the curb in wet clumps. A school bus rumbled away from the stop, diesel smell drifting behind it. The crosswalk light changed slow, and when it finally flashed, walk, I crossed with my head down like I always did, focused on getting home. I remember thinking about homework, about what snack I wanted, about nothing important. Then I felt it, that shift in awareness when you realize someone is looking at you. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk without meaning to. My heart did this quick jump, like it was trying to climb out of my chest for a better view. I looked up at the house. In the front window, behind the crooked blinds, there was a figure, standing perfectly still, not moving, not waving, not doing anything that would make sense. Just there, a tall silhouette, darker than the room behind it. The blinds were angled wrong, so I couldn't see a face. I couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman. All I could tell was that it was upright, centered behind the glass, like it had chosen that exact spot on purpose, and it was facing me. The street was quiet in that late afternoon way. No kids shouting, no teachers outside, just the distant rumble of traffic, a dog barking somewhere down the block, and the rustle of leaves as the wind pushed them along the sidewalk. My pulse hammered. A part of my brain tried to be logical. Maybe it was someone who lived there and just happened to be standing by the window. Maybe they were watching TV and I caught the reflection wrong. Maybe they were looking at something else and I was assuming it was me because I was nervous. I forced myself to keep walking. I didn't run. Running would have turned it into something. Running would have made it real. So I walked past the house like I hadn't seen anything. I kept my eyes forward. I tried to control my breathing, but in my peripheral vision, I could feel that window like a spotlight. When I finally reached the end of the block and turned the corner, I looked back. The silhouette was still there. Still, upright. In the window like a cutout. I told myself to stop being dramatic. I told myself it was probably nothing. I told myself my friends were right and that I was just a kid who got scared too easily. But the next day, it happened again. And the next day. Every afternoon I walked home alone, the figure was there, in the same window, standing in the same spot, motionless behind the crooked blinds. It didn't wave, it didn't shift, it didn't step away when I passed. It simply watched. At first, I tried to convince myself it was a prank. Some older kid messing with me because they knew I was alone. Maybe my friends had told someone I was scared of the house, and someone decided to lean into it. But no matter how much I tried to explain it away, the feeling in my stomach stayed the same, cold and tight, like my body understood something my brain didn't want to admit. By the second week of October, I started timing my steps. I'd reach the crosswalk, press the button, and count the seconds like it mattered. I'd speed up without realizing. I'd keep my eyes down, then force myself to glance up at the window because not looking felt worse. One afternoon, the sky was overcast and the streetlights flickered on early. The house looked darker than usual, the interior behind the blinds almost completely black. And that's when the twist hit me. There was no light on in the house. No lamp glow, no TV flicker, nothing. Just darkness. Yet the silhouette still stood in the window, solid, upright, perfectly centered. Like it didn't need light to exist. Like it belonged to the dark. I stopped walking. I stared. And for the first time, I wasn't just scared of an angry homeowner. I was scared of the possibility that no one lived there at all, and something was still watching me anyway. By the time Halloween week rolled around, I'd started building my afternoons around that house. Not in a brave way, not in a let me investigate way. More like the way you learn to live with a broken step on your front porch. Your body adjusts without you noticing. I'd leave school at the same time, take the same route, keep my backpack straps tight against my shoulders like they could anchor me, and prepare myself for the moment my eyes would drift up to that front window. Some days I told myself I wouldn't look. I'd get halfway down the block and think, nope, not today. Then my neck would do it anyway, turning without permission, pulled by the same instinct that makes you check a rearview mirror when you feel like someone's behind you. The silhouette was always there. It became routine, and that was almost worse. Fear that turns into routine doesn't go away. It just settles deeper. It becomes a normal part of your body, like a bad habit. I tried telling my friends again, but it was hard to explain without sounding like I was making it up. They'd look at me like I was trying to scare them for fun, or like I was desperate for attention. "Bro, it's probably just someone who lives there," one of them said, shrugging. "Old people are creepy. They stare." Another laughed. "Maybe it's a ghost." Boo. They didn't get it. Or maybe they didn't want to get it. It's easier to laugh at something than to accept you might have to be afraid of it too. So I stopped talking about it. I kept it to myself. That's what kids do when they realize their fear isn't going to be validated. They swallow it and act normal until the fear starts leaking out in other ways. Sleep, appetite, the way you jump when someone calls your name from behind. The week before Halloween, the weather dropped hard. The mornings had that sharp bite that makes your nose burn. By afternoon, the wind picked up, and it carried the smell of wet leaves and cold soil. Leaves skittered along the sidewalks in little dry swarms, hitting your shoes like something small trying to get your attention. The sun went down early, and the light had that tired gray-blue tone like the day was already giving up. That Thursday, my friends were still staying after school. Band practice, tutoring, whatever. They waved and disappeared inside, and I did the same thing I'd been doing for weeks. Adjusted my backpack, pulled my hood up, and started home alone. The walk to the crosswalk felt normal, familiar. The crosswalk button clicked under my thumb, sticky and worn. I waited with my hands shoved into my hoodie pocket, watching the traffic crawl past. Each car's headlights already on, even though it wasn't fully dark yet. When the signal finally changed, I crossed fast, shoes slapping the painted lines, and the house was there, waiting across the street, like it always was. Same peeling paint, same dead lawn, same crooked blinds. Only this time, when I looked up at the front window, the silhouette wasn't there. For half a second, my brain didn't know what to do with that. Relief hit first. A quick warm wash through my chest, like I'd just been let off the hook. It was almost dizzying, like my body had been braced for a punch, and it never came. Then the relief turned into a different feeling, wrongness, because the house didn't feel less creepy without the silhouette. It felt more alert, like it had shifted its attention elsewhere, like it had moved. I slowed down. I told myself to keep walking. Don't pause. Don't do anything that draws focus. Just pass it like always. But my eyes kept scanning, and that's when I saw it. The figure was on the porch, not behind glass anymore, not filtered through blinds, not turned into a shadow by a window frame. It was out in the open, standing near the front door, half under the porch roof, where the shadows pooled thicker. I couldn't see facial features clearly because the porch light wasn't on, and the street light didn't reach all the way up there. But I could see enough to know it was tall. Too tall to be a kid. Tall enough that the outline of its shoulders looked wrong against the door frame, like it didn't quite fit the house. It didn't wave. It didn't call out. It didn't step off the porch. It just stood there, facing the sidewalk, facing me. My legs went stiff. My mouth went dry. The inside of my hoodie suddenly felt too warm, like my body was overheating while the air outside stayed cold. I tried to act casual. I tried to keep my pace steady. I tried to keep my eyes forward and treat it like background. But the figure had changed the rules, because when something moves from a window to a porch, it's no longer just watching. It's presenting itself. It's taking up space where it can do more than stare. I took a step, then another. The leaves scraped along the sidewalk in the wind. A car passed on the street behind me, tires hissing on the damp road. Somewhere far away, a dog barked twice. And then I heard the sound that turned my blood to ice. Mumbling. At first it was so faint I thought I imagined it. A low, rough murmur drifting from the porch area. Not loud enough to catch words. Not clear enough to call language. It sounded like someone talking to themselves, except the tone was too flat, too constant, like a broken recording. I swallowed hard and kept walking. My eyes stayed forward, but every nerve in my body was angled toward the porch, trying to read movement from the corner of my vision. The mumbling continued, a string of sounds, not sentences, not even recognizable words, just breath and consonants. A wet, low whisper that came in uneven bursts, like someone practicing a phrase and never getting it right. My heartbeat hammered against my ribs. My hands inside my hoodie were sweaty. I was almost directly in front of the house now. This was the point where, on any other day, I'd keep going and not look back until I reached the corner. This was the point where the silhouette would be in the window, and I'd feel it on my back like heat. But now the figure was closer, close enough that if it stepped off the porch, it could reach the sidewalk in a few strides. I wanted to run, but I didn't, because running feels like surrender. And kids, especially kids trying to be brave, hate surrender. So I walked. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The mumbling shifted, and for the first time it sounded directed. Not at the air, not at itself. At me. My skin prickled. The hair on my arms lifted under the fabric. I risked a quick glance sideways without fully turning my head. The figure's head was angled slightly toward me, not looking at the street, not staring into nothing. It was oriented exactly where I was. I looked forward again immediately, my stomach twisting. That's when I realized something that made my legs feel numb. My pace had changed without me noticing. I'd sped up slightly. Not a run, but faster, my body trying to get distance. And the mumbling changed too. Not the volume, the rhythm. It matched my movement, like it was calibrating. I slowed down for half a second, just to test it, just to prove my brain wasn't making patterns out of fear. The mumbling slowed. It stretched out, the gaps between sounds widening. My throat tightened. I sped up again, a little more. My shoes scuffed over leaves. The mumbling quickened. Shorter bursts, closer together, like breath, like someone sinking their body to mine. I didn't need to see its feet to understand. I could feel it in my bones. The figure wasn't just standing there making random noise. It was tracking me specifically. I kept walking, faster now, my shoulders tight. I didn't look back again because I was terrified of what I'd see if I did. I focused on the sidewalk ahead, like if I kept moving, the house would become someone else's problem. But as I passed the edge of the dead lawn, the mumbling grew sharper for a moment. Closer, clearer, still nonsense, but undeniably human. And right then, with the wind pushing leaves against my ankles and the sky turning darker by the second, I understood the twist in my gut like a truth. That figure had moved from the window to the porch because watching wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't just observing my routine. It was waiting for the moment I would be alone. And now it was matching my pace like we were connected by an invisible string. Like if I stopped, it would stop too. And if I ran, it would know exactly how fast to follow. I told myself I could make it past. That was the last lie I believed that day. I'd walked by that house 100 times, even with the figure on the porch, even with the mumbling. There was a part of me that thought the sidewalk was still mine. Public space, daylight fading but still present, cars still passing, the world still normal enough that nothing real could happen. I kept my eyes forward and pushed my feet faster, trying to turn fear into momentum. The leaves scraped along the concrete like dry fingers. Wind pushed against my hood. Somewhere behind me, the mumbling continued in that ugly, breathy rhythm that rose and fell like it was counting my steps. I was almost past the property line, the edge where the dead lawn met the sidewalk and the world should have snapped back into ordinary. Then I heard it. A sudden thump of weight on wood. Not the soft shift of someone turning, a hard, decisive sound, like a foot landing on the porch steps. My entire body reacted at once. My shoulders jerked, my stomach clenched, and I felt a spike of adrenaline so sharp it made my vision sharpen, edges of the world going crisp. Another thump, faster, and then the sound that erased all doubt. The hollow, rapid rhythm of someone coming downstairs in a hurry. I turned my head just enough to glance. The figure had left the porch. It launched down the steps like it had been waiting for permission, long legs eating the distance with terrifying ease. The shape wasn't slow, wasn't hesitant, wasn't sickly. It moved with purpose, fast, direct, closing the gap like the space between us was nothing. My brain screamed, "Run," before my pride could argue. I sprinted. My backpack bounced hard against my spine, straps biting into my shoulders. My shoes slapped the sidewalk in uneven beats because I'd never been a good runner. I could hear my own breath tearing out of my throat, loud and ragged, and behind it, behind everything, I heard the figure's footsteps. They weren't heavy like I expected. They were quick, light, too fast. Like the person chasing me knew exactly how to move without wasting energy. And the mumbling, it didn't stop. It came with the footsteps now, closer, louder, the nonsense syllables breaking into sharper fragments. Not words I could understand, just a harsh, low stream of sound, like someone chanting to themselves while they ran. The voice scraped out. then something like a laugh that wasn't a laugh. Panic surged so hard my chest hurt. I looked ahead desperately, searching for anything. Someone, a car pulling out, a neighbor watering plants, a porch light flipping on. The street was too quiet. The houses were closed, curtains drawn. The world had pulled back inside for the evening, and I was outside, exposed. I couldn't make it home like this. I could already tell. I could feel the chaser gaining, the footsteps behind me tightening the distance. I needed somewhere to disappear. And then I saw the alley. It wasn't even a good alley. It was a narrow gap between two buildings, half hidden by a fence and a cluster of trash bins. The entrance was shadowed, the concrete darker, the air around it cooler. It looked like the kind of place my parents would have told me not to go. But in that moment, danger was relative. I cut hard to the right and ducked into it. The alley swallowed me instantly, like stepping into a different atmosphere. The sounds of the street dulled. The air smelled like damp cardboard and old garbage. The concrete under my feet was gritty, scattered with crushed leaves and bits of trash. I ran 3 steps in and then stopped, because stopping made sense only if I could hide. A dumpster sat halfway down the alley, pushed against the wall, lid slightly ajar. The smell hit me like a punch. Rotting food, sour liquid, something metallic and rancid underneath it all. Flies shouldn't have been active in that cold, but I heard a faint buzzing anyway, as if the alley had its own rules. I crouched behind the dumpster so fast, my knees slammed the ground. Pain flashed up my legs, but I didn't care. I pressed myself tight against the dumpster's side, my backpack digging into my shoulders, my hands clamped over my mouth to keep my breathing quiet. I listened. For a second, there was nothing but the blood rushing in my ears and the far-off hum of traffic beyond the alley mouth. Then, footsteps. They stopped right at the entrance. So close it felt like the air changed. I squeezed my eyes shut and forced myself not to move. My lungs burned. My throat ached from holding breath. I could taste stale saliva and the faint copper tang of fear. The mumbling continued, low, rough, right there at the alley mouth. It wasn't loud enough to make out words, but it was undeniably human. A man's voice. That much I was sure of now. Not a kid, not a prankster laughing. An adult voice, distorted by distance and darkness, slipping through the alley like smoke. My heart hammered so hard, it made the dumpster vibrate. At least it felt like it did. I told myself, don't let it hear you. Don't let it know exactly where you are. If it comes in, maybe it will look around and leave. Maybe it won't check behind the dumpster. Maybe a footstep inside the alley, closer. The grit on the concrete crunched under weight. Slow, deliberate, like the person wasn't running anymore, like they didn't need to. My stomach turned so hard I thought I'd throw up. The footsteps advanced. 1, 2, 3. The mumbling came with them now, drifting closer, thicker, filling the narrow space like it belonged there. I could hear breathing too. A harsh inhale, a slow exhale, close enough that it felt like the air itself was being pulled and pushed around the dumpster. My eyes watered. I didn't blink, because blinking felt too loud. I stared at a stain on the dumpster's metal side, a long, dark streak that looked like dried soda, and I prayed, actually prayed, that the person wouldn't lean over, wouldn't crouch down, wouldn't peek behind. The footsteps stopped, right beside the dumpster. So close I could see the shadow of legs on the concrete beneath it, warped by the alley's dim light. My body went numb. The mumbling dropped into something softer, like the voice was speaking closer to the ground, like the person was talking to himself directly over the dumpster lid. I could hear the wet click of saliva, the faint scrape of fabric. My breath was trapped in my chest, and I felt my heartbeat in my fingertips. Then the voice leaned in closer, and for a split second, the nonsense syllables sharpened into something almost word-like. Still unreadable, still wrong, but close enough to make my skin crawl. It sounded like the voice was right behind the dumpster, right behind my head. I bit down hard on my knuckle to stop myself from making a sound. And then, suddenly, footsteps. Fast, not approaching, retreating. The figure bolted out of the alley, the rapid rhythm of shoes on concrete fading quickly, then spilling back into the open street beyond. The mumbling vanished with it, cut off like someone had yanked a plug. I stayed frozen. I didn't move for what felt like forever. My legs cramped, my back ached, my hands shook so badly my teeth chattered silently against my knuckle. I waited until the silence felt stable, until the alley stopped feeling like it was holding its breath. Then I lifted my head just enough to peek around the dumpster's edge. The alley entrance was empty, only the late afternoon light beyond, dim and gray, and a few leaves tumbling across the sidewalk like nothing had happened. I didn't stand up right away. I stayed crouched, listening. And that's when I heard it. One last fragment of that voice, so faint it could have been my imagination. Not in front of me, not out on the street, but from the other side of the dumpster, close enough to make my blood go cold, like someone had whispered directly behind the metal. A final murmur, a final breath, as if the person hadn't run away at all, as if he'd only moved out of sight. I didn't run straight home from the alley. Not at first. When I finally forced my legs to stand, my knees felt like they belonged to someone else. My backpack straps were twisted, one slipping off my shoulder, the fabric damp with sweat even though the air was cold. I stepped out of the alley like a diver coming up for air, half expecting the street to look different, half expecting the world to punish me for hiding. The sidewalk was empty. The beat-up house sat behind me across the street, quiet and ordinary in the gray light. Leaves rolled along the curb. A car passed, slow, its tires hissing on the damp road. Nothing screamed, nothing chased, nothing proved what had just happened. That normality was the first cruel thing the world did to me, because it made me doubt myself. I walked fast, too fast to be casual, not fast enough to be obvious. I kept my eyes forward and forced myself not to look back at the house, even though every nerve in my body wanted confirmation that it was still there, still watching, still real. My lungs burned. My throat felt raw from breathing too hard. I tasted metal, like I'd bitten my tongue. When I finally reached my street, my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key into the lock. It took me 3 tries. The metal scraped the edge of the keyhole, loud in the quiet porch space, and I flinched like the sound might call someone out of the shadows. I burst inside and slammed the door behind me. My mom was in the kitchen, my dad was in the living room. They both looked up at the noise. My mom's first reaction was annoyance, until she saw my face. "What happened?" she asked, already moving toward me. I tried to speak and nothing came out except air. My dad stood up slowly, the way adults do when they're trying not to scare you more. "Hey," he said, "what's going on?" I swallowed hard and forced words out. He chased me." The sentence sounded ridiculous, like I'd scraped it from a nightmare. My mom's eyes narrowed. "Who chased you?" "The guy," I said. "From the house, the one across from school, the creepy house." My dad's jaw tightened the moment I said that. The house across from your school? I nodded too fast. My chest hurt. He was watching me from the window for weeks. Today he was on the porch. He ran after me. My mom reached for my shoulders, turning me gently like she was checking for injuries. Did he touch you? Are you hurt? I shook my head, but the motion made my vision swim. No, I hid, in an alley behind a dumpster. My dad's face shifted, fear crossing it quickly before he covered it with anger. Did you see his face? I don't know, I said. It was dark. He was tall. He was... My throat tightened. He was saying stuff, like mumbling, like nonsense. My mom looked at my dad like a silent message passed between them. Then my dad moved to the phone on the wall, the one with the long coiled cord, and picked it up. Sit down, he told me, voice firm. I sat on the edge of the couch, still clutching my backpack strap like it was a life raft. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My mom hovered nearby, close enough that I could feel her presence like a shield. My dad dialed 911. He spoke in that low, controlled voice adults use when they're scared, but trying not to sound panicked. Yes, hi. My son was chased on his way home from school. The guy came from a house across from the school. He says the person tried to catch him. We want an officer to come out. Hearing my dad describe it out loud made it feel more real and more impossible. My stomach twisted. He gave our address. He answered questions. He paced as he talked, one hand rubbing the back of his neck. My mom kept glancing at the window, as if she expected someone to be standing in our yard. When my dad hung up, he looked at me. 20 minutes, he said. They'll be here in 20. Those 20 minutes crawled. My body was still vibrating with adrenaline, and with nowhere to put it, my mind started replaying the chase in fragments. The porch steps thumping, the nonsense voice scraping the air, the alley swallowing sound, the shadow of legs beside the dumpster. Every time I blinked, I saw the silhouette again, still, waiting. The doorbell rang exactly 20 minutes later. 2 officers stood on our porch. Their uniforms looked too crisp against our quiet suburban entryway. One was older, with tired eyes and a calm face. The other was younger, posture stiff, hand resting near his belt like he'd been trained to be ready for anything. They stepped inside, and suddenly our house felt smaller. The older officer introduced himself. His radio crackled softly against his shoulder, bursts of static and distant voices. The younger one nodded, scanning the room with quick eyes. So, the older officer said, pulling out a small notebook. The cover was scuffed. The pages were bent at the edges, like it had been opened 1,000 times. Tell me what happened. My dad looked at me. My mom squeezed my shoulder gently. I told them. I described the house, the window, the silhouette, the porch, the chase, the alley, the dumpster, the voice. My words tripped over themselves at first, then found a rhythm. The more I talked, the more details spilled out. The crooked blinds, the dead lawn, the way the porch steps sounded under heavy feet. The smell of rotting garbage so strong it felt like it coated my throat. As I spoke, the younger officer clicked a pen and wrote quickly, the tip scratching over paper. The older officer asked questions in short, precise sentences. How tall would you say? Was he wearing anything noticeable? Did you recognize the voice? Did he say anything you could understand? Which alley did you go into? Which side of the house did he come from? I answered as best I could, but every answer felt flimsy. Fear doesn't give you a clear photograph. It gives you impressions and fragments, The older officer listened without interrupting, but I noticed something. When I said the house across from the school, his eyes flicked briefly to the younger officer. It was subtle, barely a movement, but it looked like recognition, like a silent exchange. When I finished, the older officer closed his notebook with a soft snap. He didn't tell me I was exaggerating. He didn't laugh. He didn't say kids imagine things. He just nodded once, slow. "We'll check it," he said. The way he said it wasn't reassuring. It wasn't casual. It sounded like a phrase he'd used before, like he already knew what kind of place that house was. The younger officer shifted his weight, and his radio crackled again. The older officer stood, adjusting his belt. "We'll go over there tonight," he continued. "We'll take a look around, make sure nobody's inside." My dad asked, "Do you think it's some kind of squatter?" The older officer hesitated for half a beat, just long enough that my stomach tightened. "It could be," he said finally. "We'll find out." They left after a few more questions. I watched them walk back to their cruiser through the front window, the porch light catching their shoulders. Their car door opened with a heavy thunk. The radio inside the cruiser squawked. Then the engine started, and they pulled away. My mom pulled the curtains shut a little too fast. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to my own house breathe, a sea clicking on and off, the fridge cycling, pipes ticking. Every time a car passed outside, the headlights slid across my bedroom wall like a slow flashlight sweep. I kept thinking about the officer's tone, not "we'll check it" like it was a routine call, but "we'll check it" like it was a place that had already been checked before. And the thought that settled into me, heavy and cold, was simple. What if they went over there and found exactly what they expected? The next day at school, I tried to act normal. That was the first mistake. Normal is hard when your body still thinks it's being hunted. My legs felt like they were made of rubber. Every hallway sound, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking, kids shouting, hit me too sharply, like my senses had been turned up overnight. In class, I couldn't focus on anything the teacher said. My pencil tapped against my desk without me meaning to. I kept checking the clock, waiting for lunchtime, waiting for the end of the day, waiting for the moment I'd have to walk past that house again. But the police were checking it, I told myself. "We'll check it." The phrase repeated in my head like a promise. By last period, I'd built a whole little fantasy around it. The officers would find a guy inside, handcuff him, and the story would become something explainable. A squatter, a drunk, a mentally ill person, a creep who'd been watching kids walk home. Something ugly but human. Something that ended with an adult saying, "You were right." When the final bell rang, I didn't go straight to the crosswalk like usual. I waited near the school steps, hovering just inside the crowd of kids. I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to be the one walking past the house with my name written on my back. My friends came out laughing, backpacks swinging. The same kids who joked about the house for weeks. I swallowed and stepped in closer. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, like this wasn't the most important thing in my life. "The cops came to my house last night." They stopped and looked at me. One of them raised his eyebrows. "Why?" "He chased me," I said, and even saying it out loud in daylight made it sound unreal. "From that house. He ran after me." They stared like they didn't know whether to laugh. I didn't let them. I kept talking fast before my courage ran out. I told them about the porch figure, the mumbling, the alley, the dumpster, the footsteps stopping right at the entrance. I didn't describe every detail. I couldn't. I just needed them to understand the outline. By the time I finished, the joking faces were gone. Even the kid who always made a punchline out of everything looked unsettled. "Dude," he muttered, "are you serious?" "I'm serious," I said. "The police said they'd check it." That phrase again, like it could fix things. One of my friends glanced across the street toward the house. The afternoon light was pale, the sky clouded over, and from where we stood, the house looked exactly the same. Dead lawn, peeling paint, blinds crooked like half-shut eyes. "What if it's just some homeless guy?" another friend said, but his voice lacked confidence. "Then why's he watching me?" I snapped, too sharp, too emotional. "Why's he matching my pace?" They didn't have an answer. Nobody did. We started walking, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't alone. My friends formed a loose cluster around me, talking louder than usual, like noise could keep fear away. I tried to match their energy, tried to laugh when they made a dumb joke, but my mouth wouldn't fully cooperate. When we reached the corner, my heart started hammering again. The crosswalk sign blinked its little white walk symbol. Traffic slowed. We crossed together. And as we passed the house, I couldn't stop myself. I looked. The porch was empty. The window was dark. No silhouette. Relief hit me so fast it made my knees wobble. I almost laughed this shaky, breathless sound because the absence felt like proof that the police had done something, that the threat had been removed. But then I noticed something small. The blinds. The crooked blinds in the front window were angled differently than they had been yesterday. Not dramatically, but enough that my brain caught it. The way you notice when someone moves something in your room. One side looked slightly higher, as if the slats had been twisted more open. I slowed without meaning to. My friend beside me nudged my shoulder. "Yo, keep walking." I forced my feet to move. All the way home, that blind angle stayed in my head like a splinter. When I got inside, my dad was already home. He was standing in the kitchen with a mug of coffee that had gone cold, staring down at nothing like he'd been thinking too hard. "Did they call?" I blurted. He looked up at me, and his expression was careful. Too careful. "Yeah," he said. He paused, like he was deciding which words would cause the least damage. "They came by earlier." My stomach tightened. "And?" My mom appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked tired. My dad cleared his throat. "They checked the house." My chest felt tight. "Did they find him?" "No," my dad said. The word hit like a drop. "No?" My dad shook his head. "They didn't find anybody inside." I stared at him, waiting for the rest. Waiting for he ran away, he wasn't there, they missed him. Instead, my dad said, "They told us. Nobody lives there." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What?" My mom stepped forward. "They said the house is vacant," she explained gently. "Has been for a long time." My throat went dry. "That's not true." My dad lifted a hand, not to silence me, but to slow the moment down. "They said it's been vacant for years. The property's been listed as unoccupied. No utilities, no active accounts, no current residents." My heart began to pound again. But this time it wasn't adrenaline. It was confusion, rage, the sick feeling of reality slipping. "That's impossible," I said. My voice sounded thin, like it belonged to someone younger. Someone was there. I saw him. He was in the window. He was on the porch. He chased me. My dad's jaw tightened. He didn't look at me like he didn't believe me. He looked like he believed me too much. And that scared him. The officer said it could be a squatter, he offered, as if that explanation could stitch the world back together. A homeless person sneaking in at night, using it as shelter. "But the porch," I started. Images flashed. The figure standing on the steps, the quick descent, the way it moved with purpose. My mom's brow furrowed. "What about the porch?" "The porch was clean," I said, and my voice rose with desperation because details were all I had. It wasn't like trashed. If someone was living there, there would be stuff. There'd be bags. There'd be something. My dad nodded slowly, as if he'd thought of that too. They said the doors were locked. No signs of forced entry, windows intact. My skin prickled. Then how? How does a man stand in a window of a vacant house for weeks? How does a man walk onto a porch of a house nobody lives in? How does a man chase a kid in broad daylight and then vanish so completely that the police treat the place like an empty shell? My head felt too full. I couldn't find a place to put the facts. That night, when I told my friends, their faces changed in real time. The disbelief drained out of them and was replaced by something quieter, something uneasy. One of them laughed once, but it came out wrong and died immediately. "Vacant?" he repeated. "Like, abandoned?" "Yeah," I said. "For years." They looked at each other like the joke they'd been making was suddenly expensive. "Maybe they're lying," one friend said, voice low. "Why would they lie?" another asked. No one answered. For the next few days, I felt trapped between two versions of reality. In one version, I was a kid who'd been chased by a man hiding in a vacant house. A squatter, a creep, someone dangerous but explainable. In the other version, I was a kid who'd been watched by something that didn't need a homeowner, didn't need light, didn't need permission to stand in a window. And the worst part wasn't that people didn't believe me. Some did. My parents did, in the way they tightened locks and checked windows and walked me to the corner for a while. The worst part was that even the reasonable explanation didn't fit the feeling. Because when the figure watched me, it didn't look like someone living there. It looked like someone stationed there. Like the house wasn't a home. It was a post. A place to stand. A place to wait. And the thought that crawled into my mind, unwanted and stubborn, was this. Maybe the figure didn't live in that house at all. Maybe it was guarding it. Maybe it moved from the window to the porch, not because it wanted to chase me, but because something inside that house needed to stay untouched, unseen, and quiet. And I was getting too close to understanding that the house wasn't empty. Not really. The week after the police told my parents the house was vacant, my dad walked me home. Not all the way. He couldn't, not with work, but far enough to feel like control. He'd meet me near the school, keep a few steps behind like he didn't want to embarrass me, and walk with his hands in his jacket pockets, scanning the street the way he scanned grocery store parking lots at night. My mom started making dinner earlier so she could be home when I got in. The whole house adjusted around my fear without saying the word fear out loud. For a few days, it helped. When an adult is beside you, the world behaves. The street feels brighter. The corners feel less sharp. It's amazing how much safety comes from having someone taller than you in your shadow. But by the end of that week, the schedule changed. My dad couldn't leave work early. My mom couldn't keep shifting her hours. The normal world started pushing back into place, and I was expected to slide into my routine like nothing had happened. That Friday, I walked home alone again. The afternoon was already dying when school let out. October light does that. It fades like a battery draining, the sky going gray-blue faster than your brain can adjust. The wind was colder, sharper, and it pushed dry leaves along the sidewalk in twitchy little bursts. Somewhere nearby, someone's sprinkler clicked on and sprayed mist into the air, and the smell of wet grass mixed with the smell of cold pavement. The crosswalk light blinked. I stood there with my backpack straps tight in my fists, staring at the button like it might make a difference. The metal casing was cold under my thumb. I pressed it and waited. Cars moved slowly through the intersection with headlights on. Their beams washed over the street in pale sweeps, turning the leaves into quick flashes of white and then dull brown again. The streetlights had already come on, those same sodium orange lamps that made everything look bruised and tired. The kind of light that never feels warm, no matter what color it is. When the walk sign lit up, I crossed. I didn't look at the house yet. I tried not to. I told myself I would keep my eyes forward, go straight past. Don't give it attention. Don't let it pull you in. But as soon as my feet hit the opposite curb, my vision flicked sideways on instinct. The house was there. Same peeling paint. Same dead lawn. Same porch railing leaning inward like a tired shoulder. And the blinds weren't the same. That's what hit me first. They were angled differently again. Not like someone had been careless. Like someone had deliberately adjusted them. The slats were tilted so that a thin slice of interior darkness showed through, enough to let a person see out without being seen. It was the kind of angle you'd set if you wanted to watch the street quietly. A chill crawled up my spine. I forced my feet to move. One step, another. The sidewalk felt suddenly too long. My shoes sounded too loud on the concrete, scuffing over dry leaves. I heard a car pass behind me, tires hissing, and it made me flinch like it was a footstep. As I drew closer to the house, the porch seemed to swell in my peripheral vision. I kept my eyes forward, but the presence of that front window, pulled at me like gravity. Don't look, I told myself. But looking had become part of me, like a reflex, like checking the mirror for something you're afraid is following. I glanced. For a heartbeat, I saw nothing. Just darkness behind the blinds, the faint reflection of the streetlight on the glass. Then the silhouette separated itself from the dark like a stain blooming. It was there, standing behind the glass, upright, motionless, and closer to the window than it had ever been before. Not set back in the room, not half hidden by the slats. It was right up near the glass, close enough that the darkness of its shape pressed against the reflection. I couldn't see a face. I couldn't see eyes. I only saw the outline of a head and shoulders, and the certainty that it was positioned exactly where it could see me clearly. My breath caught. I didn't stop walking. I couldn't. Stopping would be admitting the house owned me, but my pace changed. Faster, just slightly, enough that my backpack bounced harder against my spine. And that's when I noticed the second detail that made the world tilt. The porch was not empty. At the far side near the door, half under the porch roof where shadow was thickest, there was a darker shape, like someone standing back from the edge, not as clear as the window silhouette, more like a suggestion. A depth in the darkness that didn't belong to the porch itself. My stomach tightened so hard it hurt. I didn't look directly. I couldn't. I watched it from the corner of my eye as I passed, and I felt something in me recognize that posture, that stillness, waiting. My hands were clenched so tight around my backpack straps that my knuckles ached. I felt my pulse in my throat. The streetlight above buzzed faintly, and the sound of it suddenly reminded me of the fluorescent light in the alley from the other story. The way electricity can make a space feel unnatural. I turned the corner at the end of the block without looking back. My body kept moving as if I could outrun the feeling. But fear doesn't stay behind. It moves into your head and lives there. All the way home, the tap pattern played in my mind like a code I couldn't unlearn. Tap, tap, pause, tap. I hadn't even heard it at the house. Not that day, not out loud. And yet my brain insisted it belonged to the place. Like the house had planted it inside me when it chased me into that alley. That night, I tried to do homework at the kitchen table. My mom washed dishes with loud, deliberate movements, like noise could fill the corners where silence might gather. My dad watched TV in the living room, but he didn't laugh at anything. Not really. He kept glancing toward the window. I sat with my pencil in my hand, staring at a math worksheet without seeing it. Tap, tap, pause, tap. I went to bed early but didn't sleep. I kept replaying the silhouette behind the glass, how close it had been, how deliberate the blinds looked. The house wasn't empty, not in the way the police meant it. It might not have had residents, but it had presence. It had intention. Weeks passed, then months. Eventually, the urgency faded, not because the fear disappeared, but because life keeps dragging you forward, whether you're ready or not. I stopped walking that route. My parents changed my pickup schedule. We moved eventually, years later, to a different part of town. The house became a story I didn't tell at sleepovers, because it didn't feel like a story. It felt like a stain. I grew up. I got older. I learned how to laugh at things that used to scare me, at least in public. I learned how to drive, how to lock my own doors, how to pretend I wasn't the kind of person who checked windows twice. And then one night, years later, I was going through old photos, not digital ones, real prints, those glossy 4x6 pictures that come in drugstore envelopes. My mom had kept them in a shoebox, mixed together, no order. School events, birthdays, random weekends. The kind of photos that smell faintly like paper and dust and old time. I flipped through them absent-mindedly until I froze on one. It was a picture from that same fall, October, 6th grade. I recognized it instantly because I was wearing the hoodie I lived in that year. The photo was taken outside the school, a small group of us on the front steps, grinning dumbly at the camera, backpacks at our feet. Someone's parent must have snapped it at pickup. In the background, across the street, the beat-up house was visible, peeling paint, dead lawn, and on the porch, just inside the shadow under the roof, there was a shape, a silhouette, standing there, watching. My stomach dropped so violently I had to put the photo down, because I knew on that day I had not walked past the house alone. I had sworn it. I remembered being picked up early for an appointment. I remembered not taking the route. Yet there it was in the corner of the frame, caught by accident. Proof that the porch had not been empty. Proof that the figure was there even when I wasn't supposed to be. And when I stared at the porch silhouette long enough, the tap pattern returned in my head. Calm and patient as ever. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Not a sound begging for attention. A signal, like something saying, I was here, I am still here, and you were never the only one being watched. If you grew up anywhere near a small town, or even the edge of a city where people still like pretending seasons mean something, you know what a pumpkin patch is supposed to feel like. It's supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be warm cider and cold air. It's supposed to be kids with painted faces running between hay bales while parents hold hot coffee like it's a life-saving device. It's supposed to be that once-a-year kind of joy, the kind you take photos of because you want proof you were happy. That's why I didn't take my own fear seriously at first. It was last October, right after school. I was still in that stage where the day felt long and the afternoons felt like freedom. The sun was already dipping earlier, casting everything in that soft gold that makes even boring places look like a movie. The air had that crisp bite that wakes you up the moment you step outside, cold enough to make your nose sting, but not so cold you regret leaving the house. My friends and I had been talking about the pumpkin patch all week, not because we were obsessed with pumpkins, but because it was something to do, something seasonal, something that didn't feel like homework or practice or sitting in your room scrolling until your brain turned to sludge. We met in the school parking lot, backpacks still on, and piled into Kevin's car. Kevin had this beat-up sedan that smelled like air freshener and fast food and whatever cologne he'd sprayed that morning. The speakers rattled a little when he turned the music up. The floorboards were littered with receipts and empty water bottles, the kind of mess a teenager pretends not to see. He drove with one hand on the steering wheel, acting like he'd been doing it for decades, even though he'd only had his license for a few months. "You ready to pick the biggest pumpkin in the state?" he joked as we pulled out. I laughed, leaning my head against the window. "I'm ready to not do homework for a few hours." We drove out toward the patch, past neighborhoods with trees starting to turn orange and red, past little roadside signs advertising cider and donuts. The sky was pale blue with thin streaks of clouds, and the sun sat low like it was already tired. The farther we went, the more the roads opened up. The city noise thinned out. The houses got spaced farther apart. The trees along the road looked taller, darker, their branches bare in places, their leaves clinging stubbornly in others. When we finally pulled into the pumpkin patch, it looked exactly like every fall postcard you've ever seen. A gravel lot filled with cars, minivans, SUVs, pickups with dusty beds, families unloading kids and strollers, people in flannels and beanies and boots, a big wooden sign with the farm's name painted across it, slightly crooked, like it had been put up in a hurry years ago and never fixed. There were hay bales stacked near the entrance, some arranged like seats, some like barriers to keep kids from running into the parking lot. A small stand sat off to the side, lit with warm string lights even though it wasn't dark yet. The smell coming from it hit me immediately. Baked goods, cinnamon, sugar, something fried, something buttery. It was the kind of smell that makes your stomach growl even if you're not hungry. Kids laughed and shouted near a little play area. Someone's toddler cried in that dramatic, exhausted way toddlers do. A dad carried a pumpkin under one arm like it was a football. A couple posed for a photo near a pile of gourds while the sun lit their faces soft and golden. Everything felt normal. Kevin hopped out and slapped the roof of his car like he was announcing our arrival to the world. "All right," he said. "Time to get our fall vibe on." We grabbed a wagon from a row of them near the entrance. Those classic little red wagons with chipped paint and squeaky wheels. The handle was cold in my hand. When I pulled it, the wheels made a thin, complaining squeak, like the wagon was already tired of people dragging it around. We stepped into the patch. Rows of pumpkins stretched out in neat lines across the field. Big ones, small ones, weird lumpy ones, pale ones, deep orange ones. The ground was uneven underfoot, a mix of dirt and flattened vines and dry leaves. Every time I stepped, something crunched. Leaves, stems, maybe little rocks hidden in the soil. We walked down the first row and did what everyone does. Picked up pumpkins, judged them, set them back down like we were experts. Kevin made jokes about finding the perfect one, like he was shopping for a pet. My friend behind me said she wanted one with character, meaning one that looked slightly deformed. I didn't care much. I just liked being there. I liked the sense of tradition, even if it was manufactured. I liked the way the wind moved through the field and carried the smell of autumn in it. For the first 15 minutes, I didn't think about fear at all. Then Kevin dared me. He pointed toward the back rows of the patch, where the lines of pumpkins led closer to a wooded area. The trees there were thicker, darker, packed together like a wall. The shadows underneath them looked deeper than the rest of the field, like the sunlight didn't quite reach into that space. "See that one?" Kevin said, squinting. "Back there. The biggest one. Bet you won't grab it." I followed his finger and saw it. A pumpkin sitting near the end of a row, close to where the field thinned and the woods began. It was big, round, the kind of pumpkin that looks almost too perfect to be real. It sat slightly apart from the others, like it had been placed there on purpose. I laughed. "That's not even that far." Kevin smirked like he'd already won. "Sure, then go get it." My other friend groaned. "Why do you always do this?" "Because it's funny," Kevin said, already pushing the wagon handle toward the row. "Come on, let's go. Biggest pumpkin gets bragging rights." We started down the row. The farther we walked, the fewer people we saw. Families stayed near the front, near the stand with the warm smells and the string lights, near the hay bales and photo spots. Out here, the rows felt longer. The field felt wider. The wind felt colder. The sound changed too, but I didn't notice it immediately. At first, the voices from the main area were still there. Kids laughing, parents calling names, the hum of casual conversation. Then, with every few steps, those sounds thinned out like smoke. I heard the wagon squeak louder than anything else. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It started to feel like we were the only ones making noise in the whole place. "Man," Kevin said, looking around. "It's quieter back here." "Yeah," I replied, and the word came out softer than I meant it to. The air felt different, like the field was holding its breath. The trees at the edge of the patch loomed closer. The shadows grew thicker between their trunks. The sun still shone above us, but the light felt weaker here, filtered by branches. Then it happened. The moment that made the normal fall scene tilt sideways. The noise from the main area didn't fade gradually like it should have with distance. It dropped, like someone turned the volume down too fast. 1 second, I could still hear a kid laughing somewhere near the entrance. The next, it was gone. Not faint, not far away, just erased. All that remained was the wagon's squeak and the dry crunch of our footsteps. Kevin didn't seem bothered. He just kept walking, still grinning, still confident, still treating it like a game. But my stomach tightened anyway. A quiet, instinctive warning I couldn't justify. Because silence in a place full of people isn't just quiet. It's absence. And the way it fell over the back rows of that pumpkin patch felt less like we had walked away from the crowd, and more like we had stepped into a pocket of air where the crowd couldn't reach us anymore. The farther we went, the more the pumpkin patch stopped feeling like a place people visited and started feeling like a place that existed only for us. The rows narrowed. The pumpkins got more scattered, the vines thinner, the dirt darker and softer underfoot, as if it held more moisture here near the tree line. The wind shifted direction and carried a different smell. Less cinnamon and sugar, more damp leaves and cold bark. The kind of smell you get when you step into the shade after being in sunlight too long. The woods loomed just ahead, a wall of trunks and tangled branches. No trail sign, no fence, just trees pressed together, their shadows thick at the base like bruises. Kevin kept pulling the wagon, squeak, 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 like the sound was a joke. "It's back here," he said, pointing. "Told you." I saw the pumpkin he'd meant. It sat near the end of the row, close to where the pumpkins stopped and the field gave way to wild growth. It was huge, round, heavy-looking, with a thick stem that curled like a hook. "Okay," I said, trying to sound confident. "I'll get it." My friend behind us hesitated. "Do we really need the biggest one?" Kevin laughed. "It's tradition now." I stepped off the row path and moved toward the pumpkin. The ground felt uneven, vines snagging at my shoes. I bent to grab the stem, testing the weight. That's when I noticed something else. Something my brain tried to file as farm decoration, the way it does when it wants everything to make sense. Behind the pumpkins, closer to the woods, there was a figure. At first glance, it looked like a scarecrow. It was thin, too thin. The torso looked narrow and straight. The arms were out to the sides, angled slightly upward, like a cross. There was a hat on its head, wide brim, the kind farmers wear in photos. It stood just beyond the last line of pumpkins, right where the shadow of the trees began. My first thought was automatic. Oh, cute. They put a scarecrow back here to keep people from wandering into the woods. But the thought didn't sit right, because the figure wasn't stuffed straw. It didn't have that lumpy, uneven shape a scarecrow usually has. It looked precise, clean, like a person trying to become an object. I straightened slowly, still holding the pumpkin stem, and stared. The hat moved, not flapping in the wind, not shifting like it was loose on a post. It lifted slightly, just a tiny rise and fall, like something underneath it had taken a breath. My stomach tightened so suddenly, it felt like a hand closing around it. "Do you guys see that?" I whispered. Kevin glanced over his shoulder. His eyes flicked to the figure for half a second. "See what?" "That," I said, nodding toward the tree line. "That scarecrow." Kevin squinted. "It's just a decoration. Don't start." "I'm not starting," I muttered, but my voice sounded wrong, smaller, thinner. I didn't want to stare at it. Something in me resisted the idea, like staring would invite a response. So I looked down and focused on the pumpkin in front of me. I gripped it with both hands and lifted. It was heavier than it looked. The weight pulled at my shoulders. The cold skin of it pressed against my arms, damp with field moisture. "Here," Kevin said, stepping closer to help. He took one side, and together we got it into the wagon with a dull thud that made the metal frame rattle. "Happy?" my friend asked. Kevin grinned. "Extremely." I forced a laugh and grabbed the wagon handle. "Let's go." We started back toward the main area. The wagon squeaked again, loud as ever. The wheels bumped over uneven dirt, making the pumpkin wobble slightly. I walked fast, not because I wanted to hurry, but because my body was trying to increase the distance between us and the woods without making it obvious. I didn't look back right away. I tried to keep my eyes forward, tried to focus on the row ahead, tried to convince myself the scarecrow was nothing. But a few seconds later, my neck turned on its own. The figure was still there, still thin, still motionless, arms out, but it looked different, closer. Not dramatically, just enough that the position felt wrong, like it had shifted forward from the tree line by a few feet. Kevin was still talking, joking about how we should name our pumpkin. My other friend was laughing faintly, trying to keep the mood light. Their voices sounded a little too loud in the quiet rows, like they didn't belong here. I slowed slightly to see if my brain was playing tricks. The figure stayed in the same relative position, but the angle, something about the angle, made me feel sure it wasn't my imagination. I hadn't heard footsteps. I hadn't heard leaves crunch. I hadn't heard anything behind us but the wagon squeak and our own shoes. Yet the figure seemed closer. My mouth went dry. I swallowed hard and looked forward again, pretending I wasn't unnerved, pretending I was normal, but the feeling in my stomach wouldn't release. It wasn't just fear. It was a gut-level alarm, the kind you get when you realize you're not alone in a place you thought was public. Kevin noticed my silence. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, half laughing. "Nothing," I lied. We kept walking. The rows opened slightly. The patch ahead looked brighter, closer to the center. I expected the crowd noise to return gradually, like before. It didn't. The silence still pressed around us. The patch felt too empty for how many cars we'd seen in the lot, like the people had disappeared while we weren't looking. Then I heard it. Crunch. Not our footsteps. Not the wagon wheels. Behind us. A leaf crunch. Quick, small, sharp. I froze for half a beat, but kept walking because stopping would confirm my fear out loud. Kevin didn't react. He kept talking, the wagon handle in his hands. Maybe it was just a leaf caught in the wind, I told myself. The field was full of dry leaves. Wind could move them. Crunch. Again. Closer. And then another, in a tight rhythm. Crunch, crunch. Like footsteps. But the pattern was wrong. Human steps have variation. They stumble, they pause, they drag sometimes. They speed up and slow down. This was too even, too fast, too consistent. Crunch, crunch, crunch. My skin prickled along my arms beneath my jacket. I tried to listen without turning, tried to keep my face neutral while my brain screamed to look. Kevin kept pulling the wagon. "Dude, you're being weird," he said, laughing lightly. "It's a scarecrow. Chill." "Kevin," I murmured, voice strained. "What?" "I think something's behind us," he snorted. "Yeah, the pumpkins." Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound sped up. And still, no one in the patch's main area made any noise. No laughter drifting back. No parents calling kids. No music from the stand. Just our wagon squeak and that unnatural leaf crunch pattern right behind us. I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned my head slowly, like if I moved too fast, the world would punish me. The figure stood behind us, not at the tree line anymore, not near the last pumpkin row, behind us, in the open. Close enough now that I could see the hat brim clearly, the dark space beneath it like a face in shadow. The arms weren't stretched out like a scarecrow's anymore. They hung lower, at an angle that looked more human, more relaxed. It wasn't running. It wasn't lunging. It was simply there. And the worst part was the way it had closed the distance without a sound that matched the movement. No heavy steps. No shifting weight. Just that leaf crunching that didn't behave like a person walking at all. Like something sliding forward while the field made the noise for it. My throat locked. Kevin glanced back quickly, and I watched his expression shift from amusement to confusion. He stared for a second longer than before. Then he shrugged. "I don't see anything," he said, turning forward again like he'd looked at a blank spot. "It's probably a decoration." My blood went cold, because I was looking at it, clearly, and Kevin wasn't seeing it, or he didn't want to. I looked back once more, just to make sure I hadn't hallucinated it in the space between my blink and his glance. The figure was still there, hat low, body thin, head angled slightly, as if it was studying the back of my neck, and the leaf crunching behind us continued, fast, even, relentless, like the patch itself had become a metronome counting down the seconds until I did something I couldn't take back. I kept walking, but my body didn't believe in forward motion anymore. Every step felt like a negotiation between pride and panic. The wagon squeaked, the pumpkin shifted with each bump, and the leaf crunch rhythm behind us kept ticking like a metronome that only I could hear. I tried to stare straight ahead, to let the path and the rows guide me back to the main area, back to noise, back to people. But my skin stayed tight, my shoulders drawn up as if I could make myself smaller. Kevin kept talking, joking too loudly, like he was trying to force the patch to feel normal again. My other friend laughed once or twice, but it sounded thin, like she wasn't sure she believed her own laughter. I didn't say much. I couldn't. My mouth felt dry, and my throat kept doing that involuntary swallow people do when they're trying to push fear back down. The row ahead began to open. The pumpkins thinned out, and the dirt path widened, curling toward the more central area where families were supposed to be. I watched the gap like it was an exit sign. I told myself, a few more steps, and you'll hear voices again. A few more steps, and you'll see someone holding cider, someone pushing a stroller, someone who isn't part of this. The leaf crunching slowed, not gradually, suddenly, like a switch flipped. Crunch, crunch, then nothing. The silence hit my ears so hard it almost made me dizzy. For half a second, I couldn't tell whether that was better or worse. My brain didn't trust silence anymore. Silence meant the world had changed rules without telling me. My neck prickled. I couldn't stop myself. I turned my head over my shoulder and looked back down the row. The space behind us was empty. The figure was gone. No thin body, no hat brim, no dark shape near the vines. Just rows of pumpkins fading toward the tree line. The dirt path disturbed only by our footprints and the wagon tracks. The woods stood at the end like a wall, still and indifferent, shadows pooling beneath the trunks. The air looked completely normal, cold, crisp, autumn quiet. Relief hit me so hard it made my chest ache. My shoulders dropped an inch. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, and for a second I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my body was trying to release pressure any way it could. "It's gone," I said, louder than I meant to. Like if I named it, I could make it stay true. Kevin glanced at me, smirked, and spread his hands like a magician revealing an empty box. "Told you," he said. "Nothing. Just you freaking yourself out." My friend nodded quickly, eager to agree. "Yeah, see, we're fine." I wanted to accept it. I wanted to let their confidence overwrite my fear, to tell myself I'd gotten spooked by a scarecrow and my own imagination. I wanted the story to end right there, with me embarrassed, but safe. But even as I faced forward again, my gut didn't relax completely. It stayed taut, like a muscle that refuses to unclench after being hit. We reached the end of the row, where the path crossed sideways toward the main lanes. The ground here was more trampled, the vines crushed flatter under more feet. I expected the crowd noise to return. It did, but faintly, like it was coming through a door cracked open. I heard distant laughter, muffled conversation, the metallic clink of something at the stand. The sounds felt too far away for how close we were, like the patch didn't want to let them reach us. We started walking along the side path, heading toward the center. On our right, the woods continued in a thick line, hugging the edge of the field. On our left, pumpkins stretched out toward the stands and hay bales. The sun had dipped lower, and the shadows were longer now, crawling across the dirt in thin bands. I kept glancing at the tree line, even though I told myself not to. I kept waiting to see the figure again, because that's what fear does. It makes you look for the thing you hope won't return. Kevin swung the wagon handle with easy confidence. "I'm getting cider after this," he announced. "And a donut? You owe me for that pumpkin?" "Sure," I said automatically, but my voice was distant. I was listening, not for laughter, not for wind, for something wrong. We walked parallel to the woods for maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute. The field felt slightly more open here, less claustrophobic than the rows. But the tree line still pressed close, dark and quiet. The branches above were tangled enough to block the sky in places, creating pockets of shadow that looked deeper than they should. Then I heard a crack, a sharp, clean snap of wood. It came from the woods, not far in, close enough that it sounded like it could have been a branch breaking under someone's foot right at the edge. I stopped walking. My heart kicked hard, and the cold air suddenly felt thinner, like I couldn't get enough of it. "Did you hear that?" I asked, voice low. Kevin didn't stop. He kept walking, then glanced back at me with mild annoyance. "Hear what?" "That," I said, nodding toward the trees. "A branch. It snapped." He rolled his eyes. "It's the woods. Branches snap." "It wasn't wind," I insisted, and I hated how desperate I sounded, like I was trying to drag them into my fear. "It was close." Kevin shrugged. "I didn't hear anything." My friend shook her head too, though her eyes flicked nervously toward the tree line for half a second. "Probably a squirrel," she said too quickly. "Or a deer." A deer didn't make that sound. Not that sharp. Not that deliberate. But I forced myself to start walking again, because standing still felt like an invitation. We moved on, the wagon squeaking, the pumpkin bobbing. I tried to breathe evenly. I tried to tell myself, "You're back near the main area. People are close. Even if something was there, it wouldn't do anything. Not here." Crack. Another snap, louder this time. I froze again. Kevin groaned. "Dude, stop." "I'm serious," I whispered, and I could hear my own pulse in my ears. "Something's in there." Kevin turned his head slightly toward the woods and listened for a beat. Then he shook his head. "I don't hear..." And that's when the air behind us shifted. Not a sound, not a gust of wind, a presence. The kind of instinctive awareness that someone is close, right in your space, even if you haven't looked yet. My entire body went cold. I turned slowly, like my fear was made of glass and could shatter if I moved too fast. The figure was there, 10 feet behind us. Not at the tree line anymore, not halfway down the row, 10 feet. Close enough that I could see the outline of its shoulders clearly, the thinness of its frame, the hat sitting low. Close enough that the dirt between us felt like nothing. Close enough that if it wanted to, it could reach us in a few seconds. I stared, unable to process the distance. Because the last time I looked back, the row was empty. The figure had vanished completely. We had been walking the whole time. There hadn't been room for someone to sprint up behind us without us hearing it. The ground was dry with leaves and vines. Any movement should have made noise. Any normal person would have had to run, and running would have been loud. But there it stood, perfectly still, as if it had always been there, and reality had simply decided to reveal it again. My throat locked. I tried to speak and couldn't. Kevin noticed my sudden stop. "What now?" he snapped, turning halfway. Then his words died as he followed my gaze. He stared into the space behind us, eyes narrowing, trying to find what I was seeing. His face shifted from annoyance to confusion to something quieter. He didn't laugh this time. He didn't shrug it off. He swallowed hard. "Okay," he muttered, voice lower. "What the hell is that?" The figure didn't move. It didn't wave. It didn't lunge. The hat brim hid the top of its face, and the rest of its features were swallowed by shadow. The stillness was worse than movement. Stillness felt like control. And the thought that hit me, cold and absolute, was this: it didn't need to chase us. It didn't need footsteps. It could erase itself and reappear closer, like distance didn't apply to it the way it applied to us. 10 feet. A gap that made no sense. A gap that shouldn't have been possible. And yet, it had closed it anyway. Quietly, patiently. Like it was waiting for the moment we finally understood we were not walking away from it. We were being allowed to walk until it decided we were close enough. For a second, none of us moved. That's what fear does when it can't decide which reality to accept. Your body freezes like it's waiting for the world to explain itself. The pumpkin patch around us stayed perfectly ordinary. Rows of orange pumpkins, dirt paths, late sun thinning toward dusk. Yet everything inside my chest turned into a tight, trembling knot. The figure stood 10 feet back, hat brim low, frame too thin to feel right. It didn't sway with the wind. It didn't shift its weight the way a person naturally does. It was still in a way that made it look like it belonged to the landscape more than we did. Like it had been planted there. Kevin's hand tightened on the wagon handle until his knuckles went pale. My other friend's mouth hung open slightly, but no sound came out. I tried to speak, tried to say something practical, something grown up like "let's go" or "run." But my throat locked. Air moved in and out of my lungs, fast and shallow, and every inhale felt too small. The figure's head tilted, slowly. Not like a curious kid, not like a confused adult, like something studying a bug. The movement was subtle, controlled, almost gentle. The hat brim shifted with it, revealing nothing underneath, just darkness where a face should have been. That tilt sent a jolt through me because it wasn't random. It felt intentional, like the figure was reacting to us noticing it. My voice finally broke free as a whisper. Don't move." Kevin shot me a look like I'd lost my mind. "Are you kidding?" The figure didn't respond. It didn't need to. It simply straightened its head back to level. Then it advanced. At first, my brain tried to label it as walking, because that's the only category we have for a body moving towards you. But the motion didn't match any walk I'd ever seen. Its legs didn't lift and plant with clear steps. There was no sway of hips, no shifting weight from heel to toe. It just came forward, smooth, continuous, as if it were sliding across the dirt on an invisible track, and the ground made noise for it. Leaves crunched under its approach, but the crunch was wrong, too fast, too even, like someone shaking a bag of dry leaves rather than stepping on them. A rapid, steady crack, crack, crack that didn't match the pace of a human gait. My stomach dropped. The air in my throat turned to ice. "Run," I tried to say. It came out as a breathy croak. Kevin didn't wait for clarity. He jerked the wagon handle hard and started moving, dragging it forward with sudden force. The wagon wheels hit a rut and bounced, the giant pumpkin inside rolling and slamming against the metal frame. The whole wagon rattled violently, squealing like it was protesting the panic. We ran. Not a clean sprint, more like a scramble. Dirt kicked up under our shoes. Vines snagged at our ankles. The wagon lurched and bucked behind Kevin, threatening to tip every few steps. My friend ran beside me, her breathing sharp, her arms pumping too fast like she didn't know where to put them. I looked back once. The figure was closer, not by a normal amount, not by the distance of 3 quick steps, closer like it had glided forward and erased space. The hat stayed low. The body stayed thin. The arms hung at its sides in a relaxed way, not reaching, not grabbing, almost casual. That casualness was what terrified me most. It wasn't lunging like a predator. It was approaching like it had nowhere else to be. The leaf crunching behind us sped up, and it still didn't sound like running. It sounded like the earth was being compressed, like the field itself was crunching in a tight, rapid rhythm to announce its movement. Kevin cursed under his breath, dragging the wagon faster. The wheels hit another bump, and the pumpkin slammed again, a heavy thud that vibrated up through the handle. The wagon's metal frame clattered. The squeak turned into a frantic screech. "Drop it!" my friend yelled, voice cracking. Kevin didn't. Not immediately. Pride and panic fought in him for a split second, and he chose the stupid human thing. Keep what you came for. Keep control of something. We burst out of the back rows into a wider path, heading toward where the stand and hay bales should have been. The light here was brighter, and for a heartbeat I thought we'd be saved simply by returning to the crowd. But the crowd didn't feel real yet. The main area noise came back in pieces. Faint laughter, a baby crying, a distant voice calling a name. It wasn't the full, loud scene it should have been. It was like hearing life through a wall. The figure kept coming. We ran harder, cutting across rows, ignoring the neat paths, boots and sneakers trampling vines. People should have noticed us. Someone should have turned and asked what was wrong. But the field behind us still felt strangely disconnected, like we were running in a pocket of air that hadn't rejoined the normal world. I heard the crunching again, too fast, too steady, and the rattling of the wagon swallowed everything else. Kevin's breath came out in harsh bursts. "What? What is that?" he panted, and I could hear the fear in his voice now, finally. I couldn't answer. I didn't have a word for it. I started, but my mind refused to shape it into language because naming it would make it permanent. We finally reached the edge of the main area. Hay bales, string lights, the cider stand with its warm smell. Families clustered near the entrance, holding pumpkins, laughing, snapping photos. The normal scene was suddenly right there, bright, warm, noisy. The contrast hit me like a slap. My brain wanted to collapse into it, wanted to believe this was the real world, and what chased us belonged to a smaller, darker one. We ran straight toward the people, and that's when the figure stopped. It didn't skid, it didn't stumble, it didn't hesitate like it was catching its breath. It simply halted at the boundary. Right at the edge where the back rows ended and the crowd began. One instant it was advancing, gliding forward with that unnatural smoothness. The next, it was still, positioned just beyond the last hay bale, like an invisible line had been drawn across the ground. I almost tripped from the sudden realization. Kevin dragged the wagon a few more feet, then finally let go of it like the handle had burned him. The wagon rolled a foot on its own, rattled and settled crooked. The pumpkin inside wobbled but didn't fall out. We didn't stop running immediately. We pushed into the crowd, into the warmth and noise, until we were surrounded by strangers with cider cups and camera phones. My chest burned. My legs shook so hard I had to brace my hands on my knees. I looked back. The figure stood at the edge of the main area, not moving, not entering, just watching. Its hat brim and thin frame were clearly visible now, because the string lights cast a warmer glow over the field. It should have looked less frightening under that friendly light. Instead, it looked more wrong, like something that didn't belong in a family place, like a shadow trying to exist in daylight. I watched it for a long moment, waiting for it to continue forward, waiting for it to glide into the crowd and prove that nowhere was safe. It didn't. It held position at the boundary like it was obeying a rule, like it couldn't cross into the space where too many eyes might see it, or like it didn't need to, because it had already done what it came to do. It had shown us it could close distance without walking, and it could stop exactly where it pleased. As if the patch itself had lines only it could see, the twist settled into my gut with slow, nauseating clarity. It wasn't chasing us like a person desperate to catch up. It was herding us. And it didn't step into the crowd because it didn't have to, because whatever law it followed, whatever boundary it respected, was part of it, part of the game. And as I stood there gasping among laughing families, I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure wasn't frustrated by the limit. It was patient, like it was waiting for the moment we'd have to leave the noise again. We didn't talk much after we hit the crowd. It was like our voices didn't know how to exist in a normal place anymore. People around us laughed and posed for photos. Kids ran past clutching tiny pumpkins, and the cider stand kept serving warm cups like nothing had happened. The smell of cinnamon and fried dough should have been comforting, but it made my stomach churn. It felt wrong that something sweet could exist at the same time as the image burned into my brain. Kevin stood bent over with his hands on his knees, gulping air. My friend's eyes were glassy, her face pale. I kept turning my head slightly, just enough to confirm the figure was still at the boundary, still holding that line like it owned it. Every time I looked, it was there. Still, patient, hat low. Thin body and friendly string lights that did nothing to make it less wrong. "Do you see it now?" I asked Kevin, voice hoarse. Kevin didn't answer right away. He wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve and stared toward the edge of the rows, then nodded once, small, tight. "Yeah," he murmured. I saw something. Something. Not a person. Not a scarecrow. He couldn't name it, and neither could I. My friend whispered, "It stopped." I swallowed. "It didn't come in." Kevin straightened and forced a laugh that sounded more like a cough. "Maybe it's not allowed," he said, half joking, half praying. The idea lodged in my head like a thorn. Not allowed. Like there was a rule. Like it was following something we couldn't see. Kevin grabbed the wagon again, this time with shaky hands, and we moved through the crowd toward the parking lot. We kept close to families without meaning to. We walked in the path of strangers like we could borrow their safety. Nobody noticed. Nobody asked why we were pale and quiet. We were just another group of teens leaving early. The gravel lot crunched under our shoes. The sky was dimmer now, the sun almost gone, and the temperature had dropped enough that my breath puffed faintly in front of me. Kevin fumbled for his keys like his fingers had forgotten how to work. "Get in," he said, voice tight. We climbed into the car. The doors shut with heavy, solid thunks that sounded like salvation. Kevin locked the doors immediately, click, click, and the small sound gave me a strange sense of relief like metal and mechanisms could keep out something that didn't walk. The interior smelled like fast food and air freshener again, suddenly familiar, suddenly precious. Kevin started the engine too fast, the ignition whining briefly, then catching. The dashboard lights glowed. The heater kicked on with a soft whoosh. "Don't look back," I said, and I didn't even know who I was talking to. Kevin, my friend, myself. Kevin's jaw clenched. "I'm not." As we pulled out, my whole body begged to turn around. That instinct is primal. Check the thing behind you. Confirm it's gone. Confirm you're safe. But I didn't. I stared straight ahead at the darkening road, at the faint reflection of the string lights in the windshield. I kept my eyes pinned forward, like if I turned my head, the figure would be there on the other side of the glass, hat shape filling the rear window. We drove in silence. Kevin's hands were tight on the wheel. My friend stared out her window, but her gaze was unfocused. I held my own hands together in my lap, fingers interlocked so hard my knuckles hurt. I could still hear the crunching in my head, that too even leaf sound, too fast to be footsteps, too steady to be running. I could still hear the wagon rattling like it was being dragged across the boundary between safe and not safe. At home, I went through the motions. Shower, dinner, pretend conversation, but nothing stuck. My mind kept snapping back to that moment 10 feet behind us. The impossible distance, the tilt of the head, the glide. When I finally got into bed, the darkness wasn't restful. It was a screen my brain projected the scene onto again and again. I tried to sleep. Every time I drifted, the sound returned. Crook, crook, crook. Leaves crushing too fast. I'd jolt awake with my heart hammering, convinced I'd hear it in my room. I'd listen to the normal house sounds, the fridge cycling, the AC humming, the distant creak of someone shifting in another room, and I'd try to force my breathing slow. But my body didn't trust stillness anymore. Stillness was what it did. By morning, I felt like I'd been awake for a week. I didn't talk about it much after that. Kevin didn't either. The few times it came up, our words sounded stupid and small. Something at the patch. A weird scarecrow. It chased us. We avoided the details because the details made it real. A few days later, I was scrolling online, half asleep, mindless, looking for anything to distract myself. My thumb moved automatically through posts and local community pages, events, weather, lost pets, until a headline caught my eye. Anyone else see a weird figure at the pumpkin patch? My stomach clenched. I clicked. The post was short, written casually, like the person was trying not to sound dramatic. They said they'd been at the patch late afternoon. They said they'd wandered toward the back rows near the woods, and they'd seen someone standing near the tree line. Thin, wearing a hat, not speaking, not moving like a normal person. They said when they looked away and looked back, it was closer. They said they felt watched. They said it stopped near the main area and didn't come in. Same place, same time of day, same boundary. My skin prickled, cold sweat forming under my shirt. In the comments, a few people laughed. Probably a scarecrow. It's October, everyone's jumpy. Teens messing around. But then one comment stood out. Longer, more serious. The person said they'd seen it too. Not up close, but close enough. They described the hat shape, the thin frame. They described how the shadow didn't sit right under it, like the light was coming from the wrong angle. And then they wrote something that made my mouth go dry. They said, "It doesn't blink." I stared at that sentence. I hadn't noticed blinking. I hadn't been close enough to see eyes, but the idea hit like a delayed bruise. because the whole time it had watched us at the boundary, it had felt unbroken, like a camera lens, like a fixed point. Another comment came in beneath it. My kid asked why it looked like it was sliding, like it didn't walk. Sliding. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. I reread the post 3 times, hoping to find a detail that didn't match, hoping to prove to myself it was coincidence, someone copying, someone trolling. But the phrasing wasn't theatrical. It wasn't written like fiction. It was written like someone embarrassed to be scared, trying to ask a question without sounding crazy. And the worst part was how the post ended. We left. I didn't look back, but I keep thinking it wanted us to go. I set my phone down and stared at the ceiling. The fear wasn't just that other people had seen it too. The fear was what that meant. It wasn't a private nightmare. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't even targeting me personally. It was there. In that exact place. At that exact boundary. And it behaved the same way every time. Like the patch had rules, and it was the only one that understood them. That night, I slept even less, because now my mind had a new image to loop. Not just the figure behind us, but strangers typing about it online, confirming it like a quiet chorus. It doesn't blink. Shadow wrong. Doesn't walk. And I couldn't stop thinking about the way it stopped at the edge of the crowd, as if obeying something older than common sense. Not because it couldn't cross, because it didn't need to, because it had already delivered the message. I can move without footsteps. I can close distance without effort. And if I want you to leave, you will. The next October hit me like a smell you can't escape. It started innocently. The first cold morning. The first time I saw someone in a flannel at the grocery store. The first pumpkin display stacked outside a store like bright orange warning signs. Fall is supposed to be comforting. It's supposed to feel nostalgic. For me, it became a trigger. The sound of leaves changed first. I didn't notice it until I was walking across a parking lot one evening, and a gust of wind pushed dry leaves along the pavement. They skittered in a fast, even rhythm, crrk, 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 against the curb. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. My throat went dry. My heart began to race, and suddenly I wasn't in a parking lot anymore. I was back in that row near the woods, wagons squeaking, pumpkin rattling, and something moving behind us in a way that didn't belong to any human body. I stopped walking without meaning to. People passed me, annoyed, unaware. I forced myself to keep moving, but my hands were trembling at my sides like they remembered before my brain did. After that, it happened again and again. Leaves on sidewalks, leaves in gutters, leaves crushing under someone else's shoes behind me. Each time my body reacted like it was about to be hunted. It didn't matter if I was safe. Fear doesn't care about logic. Fear cares about patterns. I tried to ignore it, tried to laugh it off, tried to tell myself the figure was a one-time thing, a weird moment at a seasonal place. But the online report stayed in my mind. The comments, the confirmation that it wasn't just us. And then one afternoon in mid-October, I had to drive a route that took me past woods. Not the pumpkin patch woods, not that specific place, but a stretch of trees along a back road, thick and dark. The kind of tree line that looks like a wall from the corner of your eye. It was late afternoon, the same kind of light as last year. Gold fading into gray, long shadows crawling across the road. I told myself not to be dramatic. I told myself trees are trees. But as I drove, I found myself holding the steering wheel too tight, knuckles pale. The heater in the car blew warm air that smelled faintly like dust and old fabric. The radio played softly, some forgettable song, but it sounded far away. My mind was too loud. When the road curved and the woods came close to the shoulder, I glanced without meaning to. Just a quick, automatic look, the way you check for deer. And I saw it. Not a full body, not a clear figure, just a hat shape. A dark-brimmed outline standing close to the tree line, half hidden by shadow. It was upright still, and so perfectly shaped that my brain recognized it before I had time to doubt my eyes. My hands jerked on the wheel. The car swayed slightly in the lane. My heart slammed hard against my ribs. I looked again, just to confirm, just to prove to myself I'd imagined it. The shape was gone. The woods were just woods again. Empty trunks and branches and leaf litter. Nothing standing at the edge. But my stomach stayed cold. Because I'd felt it in that instant. The same pressure, the same awareness, that whatever I'd seen last year didn't belong to one farm. It belonged to October, to tree lines, to places where people drift too close to boundaries without realizing they're crossing them. That night, the fear sat with me in a different way. Less frantic, more heavy. I kept thinking about the pumpkin patch and how the figure stopped at the edge of the crowd. How it didn't go in. How it didn't need to. It wasn't trying to catch us like a predator. It was directing us, guiding us, out of the back rows, away from the woods, back into noise and light. Like it had a job, and the thought that settled in, slow and sickening, was the cold twist I couldn't unthink. It wasn't chasing, it was escorting. Not to protect us, not to help us, but to make sure we left a place we weren't supposed to be. As if the woods, those back rows, that tree line, belonged to something that didn't want witnesses, and the figure with the hat wasn't the threat. It was the boundary guard. The thing that appears when you drift too far, when you move beyond the volume of the crowd, when you step into that pocket of quiet where rules change. That's why it never entered the main area. Because it wasn't interested in us where the world could see. It was interested in the moment we left the world behind. And as I lay awake listening to wind scrape leaves against my window, I couldn't shake the feeling that it recognized me on that road. Not as prey, not as a stranger, but as someone it had already moved once before. Like it was reminding me, calmly, patiently, next time, don't wander past the line. I almost didn't publish this. Not because the stories weren't good. God knows my inbox is full of "I saw something in the woods," and "my house was haunted," and the usual Halloween season creepypasta with the serial numbers filed off. I almost didn't publish this because these 3 submissions didn't read like performances. They read like confessions. Like people writing with one hand while the other kept checking the window. I got them in the same week. Early October. Different states, different voices, different ages. One from a kid who became an adult and never trusted alleyways again. One from a grown man who still couldn't pass a boarded-up house without speeding up. One from a teenager who couldn't hear leaves skitter across pavement without feeling his throat close. Separate, right? That's what I told myself when I flagged them for the October compilation folder. That's what I told myself when I recorded the intro, when I stacked my notes, when I set my mic levels and took a sip of cold coffee that tasted like plastic and regret. Then I started marking the details. I do this every time. Old habit from editing. I highlight sensory anchors, the sound that repeats, the kind of light people remember, the physical detail that proves it felt real in their body. If a story has those anchors, it lands. If it doesn't, it floats away. These had anchors. All three. Orange glow. The color comes up again and again. Not streetlight, not lamp. Orange, rusty, sodium. That tired city light that makes skin look wrong and shadows look too long. Alley clowns under orange lampposts. A vacant house across from school with the porch swallowed in orange streetlight. A pumpkin patch that should have been warm and cheerful, but the boundary line, where the thing stopped, was lit by the same amber hue. Then the sound, or rather, the lack of it. No footsteps. That's the part that made me sit back in my chair and rub my face like I was trying to wake myself up. In the alley story, the clown got closer with no audible steps, like the alley swallowed sound. In the vacant house story, the figure moved from window to porch and then matched pace without a normal rhythm. Just mumbling and then nothing. And later, that whisper that felt impossibly close behind the dumpster. In the pumpkin patch story, the thing didn't walk at all. It glided. The leaves crunched too evenly, too fast, like the ground was providing the noise while the body moved without effort. And then the eyes. This is the detail that people either forget entirely or remember forever. In the clown story, the face looked black, covered, smeared, hidden, but the eyes caught the streetlight. The kid described them as the only feature that felt real. In the vacant house story, the narrator couldn't see eyes clearly, but he described the feeling of being targeted, not watched generally, watched specifically. In the pumpkin patch story, an online report said the figure doesn't blink, and another said the shadow didn't sit right. Those are eye details, not literal eye color, behavior, presence, the sense of a gaze that doesn't reset like a human gaze does. Orange, no footsteps, eyes catching light. I underlined those words in my notes so hard, the pen almost tore the page. Because here's the problem. People don't collaborate on details like that by accident. Not strangers, not across states, not with different writing styles. Most submissions exaggerate. They borrow tropes. They reach for horror cliches. These didn't. These circled the same 3 points, like they were describing the same weather system from different windows. So tonight, I'm doing something I don't usually do. I'm not just reading these stories for entertainment. I'm putting them side by side. I'm calling out the pattern. I'm saying the quiet part out loud. And maybe that's why I've been putting this off. Because once you name a pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you admit separate stories rhyme, you start wondering what they're rhyming with. I record in my apartment. Small, cheap, the kind of place where the walls are thin and the hallway smells like old carpet and somebody else's laundry detergent. My studio is a desk crammed into the corner of a spare room. I've got a foam panel set up that helps a little, but you can still hear the building. The distant elevator ding, a neighbor's TV muffled through drywall, the occasional heavy footstep that makes you pause mid-sentence and wait for the sound to pass. There's a neon sign on the convenience store across the street that leaks a faint glow through my blinds at night. Not bright, just enough to tint the room in patches. On my desk, my computer tower's fans whir in a steady rush. The external hard drive clicks softly when it wakes. The little red record light on my audio interface stays on like a watchful eye. And because I'm paranoid, occupational hazard, I keep a cheap hallway camera feed open on a second monitor. Just a little IP cam. I mount it above my door frame, pointed down the corridor. The building management would probably hate it if they knew, but I like seeing the hallway. It makes me feel informed. Tonight, the hallway feed is steady, grainy. The fluorescent light overhead gives everything that washed-out hospital look. 2 doors across the hall, a fire extinguisher box, a patch of carpet with a stain shaped like a continent. Normal. I start recording around 9:40 p.m. I do my usual routine. Levels check, mouth click test, a little silence sample. The room hums. Neon outside, server fan inside, my own breathing if I listen too hard. Then I open the first submission in my notes and begin. As I read, I find myself glancing at the hallway monitor more than usual. Not because I expect to see anything. Habit, I tell myself. Just habit. But the pattern is in my head now, and patterns make you look for their next appearance. Around halfway through my recap, my phone buzzes with a delivery notification from earlier. I ignore it. I keep talking. I keep my voice even, professional, calm. But my eyes drift to the monitor again. And that's when I notice something that shouldn't matter, but does. The timestamp in the corner of the hallway feed is off. Not by hours, not by days, by minutes. At first, I think it's a buffering glitch. Cheap camera, cheap app. The feed sometimes lags a second or two. But this isn't a stutter. It's consistent. It's showing time that's ahead of my phone's clock. I check my phone. 9:58 p.m. I check the camera overlay. 10:03 p.m., 5 minutes ahead. I frown and tap the screen like that will fix it. The seconds keep ticking. Smooth. No lag. No stutter. Just ahead. I tell myself the camera's internal clock drifted. It happens. I've dealt with it before. You reset it, it stays accurate for a while, then it drifts again. Annoying, but normal. Except it isn't just drift, because as the seconds roll, the feed shows something else. A brief movement near the elevator at the far end of the hall. A figure entering frame, and my chest tightens before my brain can translate why. The hallway is empty in reality. No sound outside my door, no footsteps, no elevator ding. Yet on the monitor, someone appears at the far end, stepping into view under the flickering fluorescent. The figure is too far away to make out details, just a silhouette in washed-out light. It pauses, stands, doesn't move like someone waiting for an elevator, just occupies a spot in the corridor. My mouth goes dry mid-sentence. The words on my script keep coming out because I'm trained to keep talking, to finish a thought, to not let dead air ruin a recording. But my attention is split now. Half in the story I'm reading, half in the live feed that insists someone is in my hallway. I glance down at my audio waveform. It's clean. No spikes, no sudden noises, just my voice, just the steady room hum. Then I look at the monitor again. The timestamp in the corner reads 10:04 p.m. My phone reads 9:59 p.m., and the figure is still there. Far end of the hallway, unmoving, like it arrived early for something. For a moment, my mind reaches for rational explanations. Neighbor, maintenance, somebody's friend, a delivery driver lost. But the pattern is sitting on my desk in ink. Orange glow, no footsteps, eyes catching light. And now I'm staring at a figure in my hallway that I didn't hear arrive. Under a fluorescent light that makes faces hard to read, in a feed that says it's 5 minutes in the future, my throat tightens. I swallow and force my voice steady as I continue the recap. But the thought forms on its own, cold and unwelcome. If the camera is ahead, then whatever I'm seeing might be what happens next. And I realize something else, something that makes my skin prickle. In the feed, the figure isn't just standing there like a stranger. It's positioned in the exact center of the hall, facing down toward my door, facing toward the camera, facing toward me. as if it knows the lens is watching, as if it's arrived before I got the chance to. I should have stayed at my desk. That's the rational version of this. The version where I recognize a camera time drift, shrug it off, finish recording, and go to bed like a normal person. But when you spend enough nights reading other people's fear into a microphone, you start believing you're immune to it. You start thinking you can look directly at the thing and make it behave. I paused my recording. The red light on the interface stayed on, glowing steady, but my waveform stopped moving. The room suddenly felt quieter without my own voice filling it. The server fan in my computer tower became the loudest sound. Outside, the neon sign hummed faintly through the blinds. In the far distance, the elevator dinged once, soft, muffled, like someone tapping a glass. I stared at the hallway monitor. The figure at the far end was still there. Same posture, same stillness. No pacing, no shifting. It didn't look like someone waiting. It looked like a placeholder. The timestamp in the corner continued to run ahead of my phone by 5 minutes, like it was insisting on its own reality. I grabbed my phone and stood up. The chair wheels squeaked a little on the floor, and the sound made me flinch because I was suddenly aware of how thin the walls were, how sound travels in an apartment building. I moved to the door and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. No footsteps, no shuffling, no muffled conversation, no elevator whir. Just the faint electrical buzz of the building. The kind of constant background energy you never notice until you're listening for something to break it. I checked the deadbolt by habit. It was locked. I told myself, it's probably a neighbor at the end of the hall. The camera clock is off. The hallway is long. You're making a horror podcast. Your brain is primed for patterns. Then my stomach tightened with a different thought. What if the camera isn't wrong? What if it's showing what's about to happen? I don't know why that thought pushed me to move, but it did. Maybe because standing still felt like waiting to be proven right. Maybe because the only way to beat a pattern is to interrupt it. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed the trash bag from under the sink, and cinched it tight. The plastic crinkled loud in the quiet apartment. I paused, listening again. Still nothing outside the door. My building has a rear exit that opens to a narrow service alley. It's not the dramatic kind of alley from a movie, just a strip of concrete behind the building with dumpsters lined up, a couple security lights, the smell of old rain and stale garbage. People use it to take trash out, to smoke, to avoid the lobby. If the figure was real, I told myself, I'd see evidence back there, or I'd prove to myself it was nothing. Either way, I'd have closure. That's another lie people tell themselves, that curiosity leads to closure. I stepped into the back stairwell with the trash bag in my hand. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and the sound echoed faintly through the concrete space. The stairwell smelled like damp paint and old dust. A fluorescent tube above buzzed, flickering slightly. The light made the walls look gray-green and sick. I moved down the stairs slowly, careful. My shoes sounded too loud on the concrete steps. I found myself placing my feet more gently than usual, like I didn't want to announce where I was. At the bottom, the rear exit door had a small, wired glass window set into it. Beyond it, I could see the alley lit in patches by sodium orange lights. That familiar color, the rusty glow, made my throat tighten. Orange. I pushed the door open. Cold air hit my face immediately. The alley smelled like wet cardboard and metal. Somewhere nearby, an AC unit droned, low and steady, vibrating faintly through the brick. A car passed on the street beyond the alley mouth, and its sound washed in and out like distant surf. The dumpsters sat lined up against the building, their lids closed, their sides streaked with grime. A security light buzzed above them, casting a harsh orange pool that didn't reach the corners. The alley stretched maybe 50 feet before it opened to the street. At the far end, under the orange light near the mouth of the alley, a figure stood. I stopped so fast my shoes scraped. My heart slammed once, hard enough that my vision tightened around the edges. The figure was too far to make out details, but the posture matched the one on my monitor. Upright, centered, still. No phone glow, no cigarette ember, no casual shift of weight. It looked like a cutout pinned to the light. For a second, I couldn't move. The trash bag hung from my hand like an anchor. The cold air felt thick in my lungs. I tried to tell myself it was a person, a neighbor taking out trash, someone waiting for an Uber, someone lost. But the alley was empty. No other movement, no footsteps, no voices. The figure stood in the orange glow like it belonged to the light itself. And then, almost as if it sensed the direction of my gaze, the figure's head angled slightly. Not a full turn, just a tilt, a small adjustment that made my stomach roll. I didn't wait to see more. I dropped the trash bag beside the nearest dumpster, plastic thudding softly, and backed into the stairwell, pulling the rear door shut. The latch clicked, loud and final. I slid the lock bolt into place with shaking fingers. The stairwell felt smaller immediately. The fluorescent buzz seemed harsher. My breathing sounded too loud. I took the steps 2 at a time, not running but close, and went straight back into my apartment. I locked my door again, even though it was already locked. Then I rushed to my desk and stared at the hallway monitor. The figure in the hallway was closer, not by a normal amount, not by 5 minutes of walking. Closer, like it had simply advanced between frames. On the screen, it was now halfway down the hall, still under fluorescent light, still centered, still facing toward the camera. No blur of movement, no hint of footsteps. It had just closed distance. My pulse hammered in my ears. I checked the timestamp again. The camera still ran 5 minutes ahead. I checked my phone, still behind. I looked back at the monitor, and my stomach dropped, because the position of the figure wasn't just closer, it was aligned. Like it had chosen the center line of the hallway with precision, like it understood the geometry of surveillance, like it was approaching the lens, not the door. I told myself to call someone. Building security, a neighbor, the police, someone who could turn my fear into a report. But my hands wouldn't move. My mind was stuck in the pattern. Orange glow, no footsteps, eyes catching light. I leaned closer to the monitor, searching for details. Face, clothing, anything that made it human. The fluorescent light washed it out. The figure was mostly shadow, edges softened by cheap camera compression. But I could see the outline of shoulders, the slight narrowing of the body, the head held too still. Then my feed stuttered. Just a single frame. A tiny skip, like the camera, dropped a packet of data. The image snapped forward, and my breath caught. Because for that one instant, the hallway behind the figure was visible in clearer detail, and I saw something that didn't belong. A second silhouette. Not at the far end. Not near the elevator. Behind me. In the camera's field of view, near my door. For one frame, one fraction of a second, the figure appeared in the hallway just behind the camera's perspective line, as if it had stepped into the space near my entrance. Not fully, not clearly. Just enough of a dark shape to register. Then the feed corrected. The hallway was empty near my door again. The figure was still halfway down the hall, as if nothing had changed. But I'd seen it. I sat back hard in my chair, stomach twisting. Because that one frame anomaly wasn't random video noise. It had shape. It had intent. It was positioned exactly where it would be if the figure were already close. If it had already reached my floor and my door and my camera. Like the hallway monitor wasn't just ahead in time. Like it was showing two angles of the same reality at once. What my eyes believed was happening and what the lens had already caught. I stared at the screen, breathing shallow, and the cold truth formed in my chest. It wasn't approaching like a person. It was appearing in the spaces between frames. And if it could exist in a single frame behind me, then distance, like footsteps, was just another rule it didn't need to follow. I didn't stand up after that. I stayed in my chair like the cushion had turned to glue, spine rigid, hands hovering uselessly over my keyboard. The hallway feed played on in its grainy, indifferent loop. Fluorescent light, empty carpet, the figure halfway down the corridor, still centered, still facing toward my door. And yet my mind kept replaying that single frame, where it wasn't halfway down anything, where it was near, where it was behind the camera's line, close enough that the geometry of the hall didn't matter. A one-frame truth. That's what it felt like. Like the camera had blinked, and in that blink it had shown me what I wasn't supposed to see. My apartment was too quiet without my voice in it. The server fan in my tower sounded like a distant storm. The external drive clicked once, then went still. Somewhere in the building, water ran briefly through pipes, a thin rushing sound behind the wall. The kind of normal noise that should have grounded me. Instead, every sound became a warning. Every click and hum felt like the building speaking in a language I didn't understand. Then I heard it. Tap. Soft, light, almost polite. Not on the door, not in the hallway, in the room with me. I froze, breath caught high in my chest. My eyes snapped to the window on the far wall, blinds drawn. The neon glow from outside leaked through the slats in thin bars. The room's shadows stretched toward the corners. Tap. It wasn't loud enough to be a knock. It wasn't random enough to be settling glass or wind. It was the sound of something making contact on purpose and controlling the force of it. A fingertip, a nail, a small object, or something brushing a lens. My gaze flicked to the microphone on my desk. Black, upright, the pop filter facing me like a shield. I hadn't unarmed it. The interface light was still on. The mic was still live. The tap came again. Tap. Tap. But it wasn't coming from one place. That was the part that made my skin go cold. It sounded like it was right beside the microphone, and also like it was near the window, and also like it was inside the walls. The room didn't have a single source for it. It had an effect. I swallowed hard and reached for the lamp on my desk. My hand shook so badly I hit the switch twice. The lamp snapped off, and the room plunged into dim neon bleed and monitor glow. Instinct told me darkness was safer, but the second the light went out, I regretted it. Darkness doesn't hide you from something that doesn't need to walk. Darkness just removes your evidence. In the dark, the building sounds became sharper. The AC unit clicked off in the distance with a mechanical clunk, and the sudden drop in background noise made my ears ring. Then, 2 seconds later, an elevator dinged somewhere down the hall. Ding. But it was wrong. Not wrong in pitch, wrong in timing. It sounded slightly delayed, like an echo that arrived before the original sound should exist. Like the building was playing its own soundtrack a half beat out of sync. I stared at the hallway monitor. The figure was closer again. It hadn't moved. It hadn't walked. It was simply closer than it had been the moment before, as if the video had quietly edited out distance. It was now within the last third of the corridor, near enough that its outline filled more of the frame. The fluorescent light didn't reveal a face. It just made the shadow sharper. I felt a sick urge to check my own door, to look through the peephole, to press my ear against the wood, to confirm whether there were footsteps, breath, anything. But the no footsteps detail from the stories pinned me in place. If I checked and heard nothing, it wouldn't prove I was safe. It would prove the opposite. Tap. This one was closer. Or maybe I was imagining closer because my body was preparing for impact. I turned slowly in my chair and faced the window. The blinds were down. The slats were angled closed. I could see the orange and blue haze of the outside world leaking through, but not the world itself. I remembered the kid from the alley clown story, lifting blinds and meeting a face pressed to glass. I remembered the way that story described the eyes as the only real feature. I remembered my own underlined notes, eyes catching light. My throat tightened. "Don't," I whispered to myself. The word barely made it out, but my hand reached anyway. Curiosity is a compulsion. It's not bravery, it's not stupidity either. It's something older and uglier. The same impulse that makes you touch a hot stove just to learn the truth. I pinched the bottom edge of the blinds between trembling fingers and lifted them half an inch. Outside, the street looked empty. The alley behind the building lay in orange sodium glow, wet patches on concrete reflecting light like old glass. No figure stood there, no movement, no shadow at the alley mouth. I let out a breath that tasted like relief and disbelief. Then I saw myself. Not literally, my reflection. The window glass caught the glow of my monitor behind me and threw it back faintly, overlaying my face and the room in a ghost image. I could see the curve of my cheek, the edge of my ear, the pale strip of my hoodie, and behind that, behind my reflection, there was another shape. At first, my brain tried to call it a trick of light, a smear, a darker patch in the room. Then 2 points brightened in the reflection. Eyes, not in the window outside, in the reflection behind me, inside my room, positioned where the hallway would be if the wall didn't exist. 2 small catches of light, like the surface of something wet reflecting the monitor glow. They held steady. They didn't blink. They didn't widen. They simply existed, patient and fixed, like the camera lens had become a pair of eyes and was staring back. My body went numb. My fingers locked on the blinds. I couldn't let go, couldn't pull them down, couldn't lift them higher. My breath stopped without permission. Tap. Right then. Not on the window, not on the wall, on the microphone. A soft contact sound that went straight through my bones because it was so close, because it meant something was near enough to touch it. I didn't turn. I didn't dare. I stared at the reflection, at those 2 bright points, and I felt the room shift around me like the air pressure changed. The AC clicked on again somewhere, but it sounded delayed, like a recording playing out of sync. The elevator dinged a second time, too close together, like someone pressed the button repeatedly, even though nobody was there. My fingers finally released the blinds. They fell back into place with a faint plastic rattle. The room darkened further. I reached for my computer mouse with stiff, shaking movements and clicked the audio software open, the recording timeline visible like a heartbeat line. The mic was still live, still capturing. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe because I needed proof. Maybe because I needed something that wasn't just my own senses. The tap came again, soft, brushing this time, like fabric against something smooth. A faint rasp, not a scratch, not a scrape, a gentle drag, and through my headphones, the microphone picked it up with awful clarity. A whisper of material moving along glass, like a sleeve brushing a window pane, like cloth sliding across a lens. Shh. Then silence. Not quiet. Silence like the feed had been muted. The waveform flattened. The room hum vanished from my headphones. Even the server fan seemed to drop out, leaving only the sensation of my own blood moving. I sat perfectly still, eyes wide in monitor glow, and in that manufactured silence, the thought landed with cold certainty. An ending that didn't feel like an ending at all. These stories weren't warnings. They were introductions. A pattern doesn't exist to scare you. A pattern exists to be recognized, to be noticed, to be answered. And as my headphones held that impossible dead air, I understood the final twist in the most unsettling way. Whatever had been watching alleys, vacant porches, and tree lines wasn't trying to keep people away. It was letting people know it was there. It was saying hello again and again, until someone finally compiled the details, underlined the pattern, and looked directly back. And now that it had looked back too.